Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the San Carlos City Council, successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency meeting of July 13th, 2015. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, are there any changes to the order of the agenda?
No changes from staff this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Rubens, is there a report from closed session?
There are no reportable items from the special meeting closed session.
All right, thank you. We're going to now go to council communications and announcements. These are announcements that are brief items from members of the City Council regarding upcoming events in the community and correspondence that they have received. They are informational in nature and no action will be taken on these items at this meeting. So let's start with Bob.
Mr. Mayor, I attended last Thursday the joint powers meeting with Redwood City, Belmont, and West Bay relative to the Silicon Valley Clean Water joint powers that we all belong to. And nothing to be say unusual or whatever happened during the meeting. We continued along. We're still in our process of doing repairing and replacing much, if not all, of the plant. So,
thank you. Matt?
Two items from just speaking with people and emails and so forth. I had gotten an email from a resident that wanted the council to consider some type of control for security cameras that are being installed on homes. And the concern, I guess, is it's fine to have a security camera that's looking onto your own property, but when it's looking onto your neighbor's property, that can be an issue. And I don't know if there's any way for us to control that or you know, what we could do about it, but she asked me to bring it up with the council if we'd be interested in looking at it. So I wanted to raise that item.
All right. Sorry. Is there some agreement for Matt's suggestion?
Through the chair, and I am not an expert on this, and I'm happy to have it discuss it if the rest of the council wants to. But having been faced with a situation like that some years ago, the advice I had gotten was, I think under California law, you actually can't observe somebody else's property with your own security camera. That doesn't mean you physically can't, but that's what I was told years ago.
Well, since this is coming up under council reports, I'd be glad to report out all the implications. I think there is some regulation of this at the state level or prohibitions on regulating, but there are some privacy issues that I think could be looked at. I just don't know. Right now, as we sit here, I don't know the limits of how far local regulation can go.
Okay. So I guess Greg will get back to us.
So you'll get back to us on those issues. Yeah. All right. And so Matt, anybody else? I'm not. No one's rising. I would like to see that, but I guess that just makes two. So
you can count me.
Okay.
Okay.
The other item that I wanted to ask about is some of the tenants that are on San Carlos Avenue, when they noticed that the senior center or adult community center was located there, they were asking if how long that was going to be. I talked to Christine about it, and they were asking if there would be any consideration for extending their I think they're supposed to be out in August, and the community center is going to be there till February, and so some of the business owners were wondering if there might be a consideration by the council to extend those so that they could stay longer than August, but not necessarily until February. And I don't know if there's an interest on the council to revisit that issue or not, but thought I'd raise it on their behalf.
You're talking about the business owners that are in there currently, and
Yeah.
Well,
like Hole in One Liquor, or the cleaners,
One and all of them.
Right,
I thought they were allowed to stay until next year when they're going to start construction. Can we have can we get an update on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't recall the details off the top of my head. I know we negotiated specific time frame with all the owners that they've signed off on, and it was based on sort of our anticipation of when construction would begin on the project. So, right, until August. So,
Is that August of this, yeah.
Next month.
And so how does that coincide with the adult community center? They're in there till February or something like that? December, yeah. Well,
well, I
anyways.
understand the issue, so let me talk to staff and, see what, if anything, we'd want to do on that.
Yeah, I thought that they weren't going to start construction on Wheeler Plaza till next spring. So,
Yeah. Well, let me circle back around, because there were a lot of issues that went into negotiating those agreements with the owners.
Okay, that's it. Sorry.
all right. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I only have one item, which is not quite as local to our community as some of the other things that were just talked about. And I just want to remind everybody that very early tomorrow morning, a U.S. designed, built, and launched space probe is going to be visiting the last, at least one time known planet in our solar system. And I was reading an article today that just caused me to think about how it's both exciting and I think a testament to our society that we're able to do stuff like that. And I had no personal role in any way, shape, or form in any of this, but I still think it's pretty cool, so I wanted to bring it to the community's attention. And last comment is no need to stay up and watch it in real time, because these pictures won't come back for about 24 hours.
All right. And Cameron?
My update is much less exciting. I attended a advisory committee meeting for the San Mateo County Community Choice Energy Advisory Board, and we got a presentation on kind of electricity policy in general, and it's just kind of educating the group. But it's just a reminder to my colleagues that the proposal for creating a community choice energy program, where essentially electricity would be bought through the county and delivered via PG&E's infrastructure, is moving along quite rapidly. There's another meeting this month, and it's going to come back to us to vote on, I think, in about 6 months' time. So that's my update.
Thanks, Cameron. And Matt, you had one more item?
Yeah, just one more item. At Carmont High School this Saturday, there's going to be the kickoff for the weekend's event called Relay for Life, which is a fundraiser for cancer research. And so I wanted to let the community know about that. I think it starts at 10 a.m.
10 o'clock at
So
Carmont.
I'm going to be out there and do my first lap around the track. So
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and I've just got a few items. I went to a Grand Boulevard Initiative Task Force meeting last month in Santa Clara, and our own Al Savay and Lisa Porras made a presentation on recent housing projects in San Carlos, and I want to just say publicly, you guys did an outstanding job and really represented San Carlos very well. Second, I attended my first Airport Land Use Commission meeting, courtesy of Cameron graciously allowing me to be on that committee. It was very, very interesting. I did learn that if we ever attempt to build a 150-foot building on anywhere along industrial near the airport, we're in trouble. Also, this is sort of council related. During the fundraiser for the ACC a few months ago, I bid on a dinner provided or served by the fire department at the firehouse, and so my family and I went, and they served us dinner over here at Station 13, and it was great, and everything that you've ever heard about firemen is true. They are excellent cooks, and we had a great time, and the evening went very well, and was just about to wrap up and when they got a call, emergency call, and they all had to leave, so we had to get out too, but it was nice that the emergency held off until we were done with dessert. Also attended the city's booth at the Hot Harvest Nights a week or so ago. A lot of interesting input from people. They had a lot of interesting ideas on Black Mountain and other issues facing the city. It's always fun to do those things because you get real-time feedback from people. And then finally, I attended the Sequoia Village ribbon cutting last Friday over at the downtown park, soon to be renamed for Frank Harrington. And Sequoia Village is an organization that sort of pulls together all the resources available to seniors to help them age in place, age in their own homes without having to take advantage really isn't a good word. It's having to go to an assisted living facilities, which can be very expensive. This program coordinates rides and all the other services like Meals on Wheels and the things that are available to seniors. They come in and they do house cleaning and that sort of thing. But it's a great organization. It's really sort of a focal point. Seniors can call one number, and it is an organization that really encompasses Belmont, San Carlos, Redwood City, and Redwood Shores. So it was really a nice little event over at the park last Friday. And with that, I think we're done with council communications. Next is we have.
We want to go to staff comments.
And yes, we do. Sorry, skipped over staff comments. Any staff comments on city administrative business?
Two quick ones, Mr. Mayor. I had a conversation today with the county health department, of which I sent the council some information. The county is in the process of starting to plan for the rebuilding of the Cordilleras mental health facilities that are up there off of Edgewood in the unincorporated area. They're not in San Carlos, but they're close to our city. So we've gone ahead and posted that information on the city's website. So if folks are interested in providing the county with comments as they start going through that process, that information is available, and the staff will stay plugged in. We've been plugged in from the beginning, and we'll continue to watch and have dialogue with the county as that facility gets rebuilt. The second, this is just sort of a staff announcement. Our longtime IT employee, Jasmine Frost, and our current IT manager is leaving us after 15 years. It seems like Jasmine isn't in the room right now, but she's actually right behind us making sure the meeting runs and the lights stay on and the microphones work and the TV and all the other million pieces of technology it takes to have a council meeting. Jasmine's been a great asset to the city for 15 years and a good friend, and we're all going to miss her. I know you guys are going to miss working with her. She gets all your tech working in the background. So just wanted to say thank you and congratulations to Jasmine as she moves on to the city of Palo Alto for a nice career development opportunity for her.
Yeah, I'm especially going to miss her because she's worked on my phone and my iPad and saved me from a lot of missing information anyway.
Mr. Mayor, I'd be
Yes.
happy to help you with that, but we'll just have to negotiate the contract first.
And Mr. Mayor, don't call me.
Funny, you were first on my list, Bob. Okay, thank you, Jeff. All right, now we'll move on to council appointments and presentations. We are considering appointing recommended Youth Advisory Council members for the terms 2015 to 2017 and reorganizing retiring Youth Advisory Committee voting members. Christine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Christine Boland, Parks and Recreation Director. This evening, Kristen Earps, our Recreation Coordinator from the Youth Center, will be providing a brief verbal report. Kristen? Here she is.
Thank you.
Here's your PowerPoint.
All right. Hello, everyone. So sad to see some of our long-standing YAC members going, but they're heading off to big things, going away to college. So one of our members that is retiring with us is Connor Abernathy. If you could stand up, we can recognize him for his long-standing term in Youth Advisory Council. Thank you so much. He's been so dedicated and just really the glue for all of us. He was acting as vice chair this whole last year and really was able to get that team spirit going with our group and was super dedicated and had a lot of fun. Thank you. We'll miss you a lot. And then some of our other retiring members who are not with us tonight, they're off exploring the world and doing all kinds of adventurous things, is Nicholas Sue and Jack Carlson. We will also miss them. They'd been with us for a long time as Youth Advisory Council members. So we would also like to recognize some of our new members. Actually, Kim Lane, if you can come on up, we'll introduce you first. So Kim Lane, this is actually her second 2-year term. So she did, her 2-year term expired. Kim is going to be a junior at Carlmont High School. She's been with the Youth Advisory Council for a while now, and she's very dedicated to working with our youth, but in particular, she's really pushing for our seniors and a collaboration between our youth programs and our senior programs. So right now, Kim is coordinating a senior ball where the youth from our community and our youth center will help and organize a really fancy night out for the seniors at the newly remodeled adult community center, and have a ball and dinner for all of them. So congratulations again on your 2-year term. And does she need to be sworn in again for her? Oh, okay. Sorry, jumping the gun here. And then we also have a brand new member, and hopefully I'm saying your name right, but Maya Ebrahimpour. Come on up here. So this is Maya. She is going to be a junior at Sequoia High School. She just applied after hearing how great the program was, and she has some friends in here. She would really like to contribute to the community. She's very goal-oriented and looking to work with the youth. So we're excited to have her on board. She'd like to get some more greater community outreach with the youth. Specifically, in her application and interview, we got from her that she'd like to have community movie nights, and that's something that we'd be thrilled to host at the youth center. Something that she'll be looking forward to working with us on. So we're happy to have you as well, and welcome. And then some of our other returning members whose terms have expired, but they are renewing for 2 years are, let's see, Emily Hutchison. She's the only one, in Kimberly also. And then 2 of our alternate members from the last few years, did apply for a full membership, and that is Nicole Lyon and Ryan Barriatua. So they had been alternates. They're joining the council for the 2-year term, or applying for a 2-year term. And then finally, Ezra Burson Mickelson. He is our youngest Youth Advisory Council member. He's been attending meetings for the last year. He's going into the 8th grade. He goes to Nueva School, but lives in San Carlos, and is a very outspoken and enthusiastic 12 or 13-year-old. So he's not here tonight, but we're also very happy to recommend him to you guys. So thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could I move to appoint the recommended Youth Advisory Council members for the terms 2015-2017?
Second.
All right. Motion and second. Crystal?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Owert?
Yes.
And Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay. And congratulations
Thank
to
you.
you all. You weren't nervous, were you?
Well, it's not yet over. If the 2 members can come up and I can swear you guys in.
Oh, okay. Who does the swearing in?
The city clerk.
Ah, good.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that you take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which you are about to enter? Okay. Maya? Just sign that one right there.
job.
All right, and best of luck to you all. All right, now moving on to public comment. Persons wishing to address the City Council on matters not on the posted agenda may do so. Each speaker is limited to 2 minutes. If the item you are speaking on is not listed on the agenda, please be advised that the City Council may briefly respond to questions posed as allowed under the Brown Act. The City Council's general policy is to refer items to the staff for attention or have the matter placed on a future City Council agenda for a more comprehensive action or report and a formal public discussion and input at that time. All right, I have several slips. The first is Robert, is it Lefevre? Lefay? I've got two clients with the same last name who pronounce it differently, so that's why I wondered.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, my name is Robert Lefebvre. My wife Mary and I reside at 1648 Walnut Street here in San Carlos. I'm here for two reasons. The first is to request residential parking permits for our neighborhood, basically because of the increase in resident and businesses in the southern part of Laurel Avenue. Businesses are having their employees and customers park on the residential streets, leaving no room for residents to park. Myself, many times I end up parking a block and a half away from my own house, of which I pay taxes on, but I can't park in front of, nor can I collect a parking fee for either. And I believe that the city has been laxed in requiring employee parking spaces prior to the issuance of the conditional use permits. As an example, Kinder Court, the office, and just recently the Salt Box. The second reason I'm here is to request a stop sign on the corner of Walnut and St. Francis to make it a four-way stop. There has been an increase in traffic, and there's a blindness at that corner that you can't see around. You miss almost a half a block before you actually see a car coming. And I've been hit, or close to being hit, several times. There have been some near misses, and there have been a number of traffic accidents at that corner. Now, there was an earlier request put in by a resident's son for a stop sign, but that hasn't been acted on, and that was over a year ago. That hasn't been acted on by the city. I have sent letters to Public Works Director and a city engineer, and along with other members of our neighborhood, and we have not received any response one way or the other. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Jeff, did you want to briefly respond?
Yeah, before the council gives some direction about where they'd like us to go with this, just a piece of information the Public Works Director just whispered in my ear that July 21st, that particular intersection is going to be discussed by the Traffic and Circulation Commission, 7 p.m., this room.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, next we have...
I'm sorry. Relative to the gentleman's request about residential parking permits, I mean, this is Pandora's box, but having said that, there's a lot of development that's going on up and down Laurel Street, and I don't know if Traffic and Circulation is going to speak, if it's on their radar or what, you know, something that, I mean, if it isn't today, it's going to be tomorrow. So I think we probably should start to look at that, especially with the new developments going, more development going down at the southern end. So I don't know if that's...
I agree. That's
my sense, and I'm sure the council shares this, is that that is an area of the neighborhood that we have heard from the last several years. So if you'd like us to prepare an item to begin to look at, or for allow the council to begin to look at and consider residential parking permits.
That's first, as opposed to...
Well, if I were you, I'd probably send it to TNC first for development, and then, but if you're interested in going down that path, so.
I think we're going to have to. I mean, I don't know what the other council members, but I mean, I've talked to a number of people in different places, and it's coming.
Well, that's
it's already here.
Yeah,
in fact.
that's my neighborhood, and I've noticed it as well. Even though I live several blocks away, I feel for the people on Walnut Street that are impacted by the businesses down there now. It's much more activity than there used to be.
So whatever we need to do to perhaps get it to...
Yeah, what I would,
E3, yeah.
Bob, what I'd say
Counselor.
is that, we have the pilot program that's just starting over on the east side, and so I think, maybe as we're evaluating how the pilot's going, we can also think about what other neighborhoods we would take it to. But I'm in agreement.
Well,
I'm sure there will be others.
I think you're one part of that. I think I agree with 100%, but it's a little bit different because of the over on the other side. There's a lot of commuters and a lot of different things. This is more the folks that are working and I drove down. I guess it was Saturday morning. I drove down Walnut Street from Howard to or Howard. I guess there's two. Whatever the street was, very narrow. There was probably 3 spaces. This was Saturday morning, 8 o'clock. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people who have cars. It's not just the folks that are, but there's lots of folks that have cars depending on different streets. So, but I think we need something we need to look at. So, thank you, Mr. City Manager.
I think we do, yeah. 4. We got 4, actually. Okay. Next is Vimal Kapoor.
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, it is regarding the property that we are buying, Black Mountain property. This to me also it's a gold mine of ideas, and it depends on how much imagination we can put into it. Related to that, I wish to...
Mr. Kapoor, excuse me for interrupting you. You're speaking about the Black Mountain?
Yes.
That's actually on the agenda tonight. So when that item comes up, that's when we'll have you speak.
Okay.
And we'll just make a note here, and when
Fine.
that item comes up, we'll call you back. All right. Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Next we have Karen Molinari. Hi, Karen.
Hello, City Council members. I'm here to speak to you tonight on a couple of agendized items, but I thought since I'm here, I want to take the opportunity to absolutely commend Christine Bolin and her Parks and Rec staff. My children have really enjoyed the camps, the summer camps this summer through Parks and Rec, and I have to say, we were on the Arundel campus for the first time because of all the construction at Central, and there was staff there the first Monday of every camp directing parents where to go. We have never had that experience at any of the other campuses. It was absolutely stunning, and I just want to give her kudos for that.
All right. Thank you. All right. And next is, was there anybody else that wanted to speak on items not on the agenda?
Yeah, over there.
Come on up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Hunt?
I beg your pardon, yes. Thank you, Your Honor, and council members, city council members. This isn't an issue, so I'll take a minute. I just wanted to express appreciation and gratitude for the professional, caring way that these meetings are conducted. Obviously, there is care about San Carlos and the residents thereof. And to say that I'm saying this on behalf of my grandmother, her day, and I put down Hunt because that was my name in my grandmother's day in the 40s and 50s, who was very active and came to all the city council meetings. This happens to be my second because of the peak in interest in Black Mountain. But she had several properties on Laurel Street and also an apartment building nearby. And I know that were she here, she would want me to express this appreciation and gratitude as I do. Thank you, each one of you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else like to speak? We have one speaker on for an item not on the agenda, but it's actually something that we wanted to do before, and this is Mike Milkey, and he's going to talk about the Red Tape to Red Carpet Award for Leadership in Economic Development and Workforce Housing. I believe you have a presentation.
I do.
Wonderful.
So good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and colleagues. and residents. My name is Mike Milkey. I'm Silicon Valley Leadership Group Senior Vice President, and I'm here tonight to speak about your great work and the award from the Red Tape to Red Carpet. I work with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. We've been there for 7 years. The Leadership Group represents 400 of the largest and most respected employers in Silicon Valley, responsible for approximately 2 of every 3 private sector jobs in the region. It's an honor for me to be here with you to recognize your excellent work in developing transit-oriented and workforce-focused housing. At the Leadership Group, we pride ourselves on working with public sector partners whenever possible and in highlighting their good work. We understand that only in working together can we best realize the policies, projects, and programs that improve the quality of life and the economic competitiveness of our region. And your city is committed to developing workforce housing and diversifying its housing stock. You realize that 2 key assets for the city are its vibrant downtown core and the close proximity to mass transit. And with limited developable land, and therefore the primary option for new housing was a multifamily development which would diversify your housing stock. City Transit Village and Wheeler Plaza combined add 316 housing units in a prime downtown location with close proximity to a Caltrain station, other transit alternatives, and with easy walking distance to amenities, an array of service providers, and retail options. Over time, the city acquired and assembled properties surrounding public parking areas and selected a developer to construct a mixed-use project, including 237 parking spaces, 108 housing units, almost 10,000 square feet of commercial space all around a downtown plaza. What's more, the inclusionary $3 million below market housing fee will help fund a new 30-unit affordable housing project adjacent to Wheeler Plaza. So it is with pleasure that I present the 2014 Turning Red Tape into Red Carpet Award to you on behalf of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group's 400 members and board, as well as the Red Tape to Red Carpet judges for your transit-oriented housing project. Congratulations.
All right, thank you very much.
And I have a plaque and a commemorative item for your collection.
Oh, nice.
Would you like to take pictures, or how should I present this?
Yes, but I'd like Al Savay to come up because he's been instrumental in this whole process, and this is his thing. It's what he does.
Hi, Al. Yeah.
All right, that's great.
Thank you, Mike. Congratulations.
I'd just like to say before we move on that we have a great community development department led by Al Savay. I mean, Lisa Porras and the other members of that department. We're very fortunate to have very knowledgeable and competent people in the city, and they just I can't say enough. They just do an outstanding job every day. Okay, we are now moving on to, I think, the consent calendar, right? Okay, approval of the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of items, consent calendar items A through M, and I think we have some ordinances we got to read?
Yeah.
I'll leave that to Bob. He can read the ordinances.
And adopt ordinance 1483, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos adding Chapter 5.45 regulating delivery of unsolicited or unsubscribed paper, plastic, or composite materials on private property in the City of San Carlos.
Another one? J.
And the second one in red.
And adopt ordinance 1492, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos amending Section 10.32 of the San Carlos Municipal Code to add Section 10.32.226, restricted parking, East San Carlos residential parking permit program.
Thank you, Bob.
I second.
All right. Crystal?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
And Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay. All right. Moving on to all right. These are public hearing items. On item 9A, consideration of adopting a resolution determining that the public interest and necessity demand the acquisition and improvement of Black Mountain properties as a public park and their financing through the issuance of general obligation bonds, and introducing an ordinance ordering the submission of a proposition of incurring bonded debt to the qualified voters of the city of San Carlos and at the general municipal election to be held on November 3rd, 2015, for the purpose of acquisition and improvement of the Black Mountain properties as a public park.
Mr. Mayor, I'm recusing myself because my residence is within 500 feet of this property.
All right. And Mr. Mattis will start momentarily.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Steve Mattis. I'm serving as the acting city attorney while Greg abstains on this item. I'm here to present on behalf of the staff this evening the Black Mountain Property staff report. I would want to introduce the council. We have, in addition to the staff that have been working on this, we also have Chick Adams, who is our bond counsel, is in the audience today, as well as Gary Kitahata, who's the finance advisor on the bond measure. Jared is here, and the council will recall that Jared made a presentation last Thursday, and then Jim Simon, who's been assisting with the property negotiations, is also here this evening. The staff report this evening relates to the Black Mountain properties, which are approximately 25 acres of mostly undeveloped open space. The city is considering acquiring the property to create a park, and were the city to acquire the property and develop it as a park, then it would avoid the potential development of up to 100 homes that may otherwise occur based on the city's existing zoning requirements. This shows the actual properties that are the subject of the bond measure that the council is considering this evening. These are properties that are owned both by Black Mountain LLC and some related interest, as well as Rolieri and the Vista del Grande property owners. These properties, as you can see, they front along Alameda and are bounded really by Madera, and Melody is the closest street to the south. The council will recall from the presentation that you had last Thursday evening that there was extensive public outreach that's been conducted between March and June of this year. That included a scientific survey that the council heard the results on last week. And the survey also showed, interestingly, that 86% of the residents of San Carlos are aware of the Black Mountain properties, indicating that the public information effort that has occurred over the last few months has actually increased the awareness of the Black Mountain properties for all of us who live here in San Carlos. The site purchase and improvement would be what would be funded with the bond measure. If the council were to elect to place the bond measure on and the voters were to approve the bond measure, it would authorize $45 million in bonding capacity that would be used for the sole purpose of acquiring, creating, and enhancing the Black Mountain Park on the approximately 25 acres that I just showed you. The improvements that are contemplated may include items such as walking paths, trails, recreation, and restroom facilities. But importantly, the ultimate development of any park at Black Mountain would be after a master plan is developed that would itself involve extensive public input and council consideration of the issue following an election if the council elects to place the measure on the ballot. What are the fiscal implications?
If this $45 million Black Mountain Park bond measure were placed on the ballot and approved by 2/3 of the voters, the net proceeds after issuance costs would be used to acquire and approve Black Mountain properties for public park purposes. The debt service on the bonds would be paid entirely from the property taxes levied on all taxable property in San Carlos, and there would be no impact to the city's current general fund. It is currently estimated that the property owners would pay an average of just under $20 per $100,000 of assessed value per year for the 30-year time period during which the bonds would be outstanding. So it's anticipated that this would be a 30-year bond that we would be talking about. At a cost of $20 per $100,000 of assessed value, the average San Carlos residential property owner would pay an additional $118 in annual property taxes if the bond measure is passed by the voters and placed on the ballot by the council. This estimate is an approximation based on current interest rates and projected assessed value in the city, with an average annual assessed value growth of approximately 3.5%. The final numbers would be determined once the bond is approved, if it's approved by the voters, and once the bonds are issued. The council, following public input and council discussion tonight, has before you two documents for your consideration. The first one is a resolution of necessity, which is required to call a bond election, and the resolution also finds that the estimated acquisition and improvement costs for the Black Mountain properties is approximately $45 million. These are required by the government code, the resolution of necessity is, and it would be the first action that the council would consider if you decide to place this measure on the ballot this evening. The second item that is before you tonight is an election ordinance. The election ordinance has as its purpose, it calls for a bond election to be held November 3rd of this year. It specifies that the principal amount of the Black Mountain Park bond shall not exceed $45 million. It establishes a maximum interest rate, and it designates the permissible uses of the bond proceeds. It also authorizes the preparation of an impartial analysis and a tax rate statement that would be shared with the voters as part of the bond election, again, if the council places this on the ballot this evening. The elections ordinance has some components to it that we would bring to the council's attention. First, it requires a citizen oversight committee to review and report on the expenditures of the bond proceeds. So again, if the public approved a bond measure and the bonds were issued, there would be annual reports to the council with regards to the expenditure of the bond funds. It requires the council to seek public input on the scope and design of the Black Mountain Park. And it authorizes, but does not require, the mayor to act as an author of the ballot argument in favor of the bond measure. The next steps in the process would be, after hearing the public input and the council's consideration of the issue tonight, if the council wishes to, you would then adopt a resolution of necessity and an election ordinance. We would remind the council that the placement of this type of measure before the voters does require a 4/5 vote of the city council, minimum 4/5 vote of the city council. The council, if you do then choose to introduce the ordinance this evening, then this ordinance would come back to you at your meeting on July 27th for adoption by the city council. Following that, then the staff would implement the council's direction by working to place the appropriate paperwork with the county for the election, for the matter to be included on the election in this November. The recommendation from staff is for the council to consider the public input tonight and then adopt the resolution of necessity and introduce the ordinance calling for an election. And with that, I and the other members of staff would be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Got a couple of requests. Matt?
Just to clarify, you mentioned about the 4/5 vote of the council. That's for both actions tonight or just the ordinance?
That is correct. It's for both actions this evening.
For both actions. And that would also then, since we'd be introducing the ordinance when it comes back to us, it also would require the same kind of...
That is correct. The adoption would as well, too.
Okay. Thank you. Just technical.
Okay. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Steve. Just a quick question. I like the idea of including the Citizens Oversight Committee that you're referring to. Is that actually a requirement under state law in this particular instance?
Let me have Chick Adams address that question specifically. Chick, you want to? It is included in the ordinance that's before the council this evening.
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Chick Adams. I'm with the firm of Jones Hall. We're acting as bond counsel to the city on this matter. There is no requirement in state law applicable to GO bonds issued by cities for there to be an oversight committee. For school districts, there is, but not for cities.
Thank you. Again, I think it's a great idea that we're including it for all the reasons that I think it's a good idea for school districts to be using them.
All right. Cameron.
Thanks for the presentation, Steve. There's a couple questions that have been raised by members of the public as we've been getting closer to the debate, and I just wanted to clear them up. The first is, does the election, or does the measure, bond measure, say that we have to build a park at Black Mountain? Could we build a school there, for instance, or could we build something else?
You can only use the bond proceeds to create and enhance a park at Black Mountain.
Okay, great. And then another question is, does all of the money have to be used at the Black Mountain property, or could some of the money be used for other purposes elsewhere in the city?
The bond measure limits the use of these bond proceeds to the Black Mountain properties that we showed to the council and the public earlier in the presentation.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bob?
Just to follow up on Cameron's question, and also this measure, if it goes to the voters and is voted on, or if we start the process and it's voted on and passed, it's up to $45 million. We don't necessarily have to take the entire bond. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So it could be less. Okay.
That is correct.
Just want to make sure that everybody understands that too.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a public hearing. And I do have several speaker slips, so if you would be brief in your comments, limit them to 2 minutes or less. The first speaker is John Rose.
Hi, Mr. Mayor, City Council. I'm excited about this opportunity. I'm glad that the council is considering it. I think open space is really critical to the quality of living that we enjoy in San Carlos. It's important to preserve the space that we have. I am aware that there are some people on low incomes that are concerned about the effect of a tax on their cash flow. I hope that council would consider some mechanism for people to apply for postponement of payment of the tax until their property is sold. I do think that this open space enhances our property values, so it's a fair trade-off, and I think the number of people in that category would be relatively small. I think it's important to consider the ecologic value as well as the public value of the open space. I live on Hillcrest Road, and 2 years ago, the only vacant lot on our street was developed into housing, and we've been overrun with deer and skunks and all kinds of animals that were living there, and it's a much smaller space. So I urge council to approve this measure.
Thank you. All right. Next we have Vimal Kapoor.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, the seed being planted by the city surely will bear good fruits in the years to come. Can we put another seed, graft the two, and harvest a better crop? My presentation is for achieving multiplier growth effect on our investment. Our Silicon Valley, where we are, is fertile ground for innovation. Our neighbors are like of Oracle, Apple, Facebook, and many other. So can we draw some inspiration from the fertile environment which is around us? In nature, everything is interconnected. Let us all feel connected to all that is around us that can empower us. In the spirit of Silicon Valley, let us become entrepreneurs with vision, able to dream. It is in giving that we receive. This property has the potential for us to enlarge our scope of development. One area which I am considering by reaching out to veterans in a small way. we can carve out a veteran recoup facility by earmarking the existing 3 buildings with desired modifications for the purpose. We prepare a blueprint of the property by interacting with related agencies for being able to attract corporates around us to discharge their social obligations by contributing generously to community welfare. I'm skipping, with this 2 minutes presentation. Example, just I go to one example. Let's consider we approach Larry Ellison of Oracle and make a presentation to him for naming the facility Oracle Veteran Recoup Facility. If he agrees, full cost or major portion of the cost will be borne by Oracle. We can sound him for naming a nature trail on the property as Oracle Nature Trail, right? That will involve additional financial commitment on the part of Oracle. For a children play area, we may rope in Facebook, right? Just a few lines. A good presentation and our genuine commitment to keep the costs under control can help us financial participation from interested donors in the area. In a sense, by reaching out to large corporates, we will kill 2 birds with 1 stone. The burden on the, taxpayers or the reluctance, that also we could, and it'll depend upon our imagination how we give shape to in this area, which is, fertile. Word over it is your area is known for.
Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. All right, next is Linda Tuchel.
Linda.
Come on up, Linda. We don't bite. You know that.
I believe I know all of you very well. My name is Linda Tuchel. I'm, I guess this is the time maybe to tout my accomplishments. I'm a former Citizen of the Year of San Carlos, chairman of Hometown Days for many, many years, director of the Girl Scouts camp for many of your daughters and many people in San Carlos, many families. Since I've lived in San Carlos and I moved here in 1972, pretty much my whole life has been supporting the community. This is a no-brainer. You must do this. I think it's the best thing that could happen to our families in San Carlos. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. All right, next we have Bonnie McClure.
I'm glad to see that most people are really in favor of this. I expected that, and I'd like to add my 2 cents to that. We moved to our house in 1958 when the hills were green and the trees were there before so much development. And now we have a chance to preserve a very small part of that wonderful open space that used to be here in San Carlos, and I urge you to do so. Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. Okay, next is it John McCluskey? I hope I didn't butcher that. I recognize you.
Good evening. Very quickly, personally, I'm an enthusiastic supporter of development of the park, and as I've talked to neighbors and friends that are residents of the city, universally there has been support for it. 2 specific questions did come up that I will address to the council, possibly to staff. One of them was in developing the park and deeding it, and I don't know if that's the proper legal term, would there be a way of ensuring that it would remain as a park in perpetuity so that it would not come up for reuse or redeployment as we discussed with the North Crestview Park? The second question, specifically to staff, is there confidence that the city could properly maintain the property? The individual I talked to had a personal comment that he did not feel the city was properly living up to its commitment of maintaining the youth center. I have no personal opinion about that. But those were two specific questions that came up that were of interest to citizens I talked to. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. This question does come up.
Happy to respond to those.
Yeah.
This is an agendized item, so we
Absolutely.
can continue the discussion. So in terms of protecting the park in the future, that's something that's definitely been an interest to the council members and the mayor going forward. We're looking at all options for how strong we can make that. We think we can make it as strong as the only way that it would ever be changed from being a park would be a vote of the people of San Carlos, which would be, I think, the maximum protection we could provide it in the future. In terms of the maintenance issues, we've got several really nice projects just behind us and just in front of us at the youth center for maintenance. We've just installed several new playgrounds and completely renovated Crestview Park. So this room itself was renovated for the first time in 60 years. So the city's been very committed to spending our general fund capital money on our facilities, our parks, and our infrastructure. And if the council were to put this on the ballot later and the people of San Carlos were to vote for this, we'd be committed to maintaining that facility at the same high standards we have for all our other facilities. So thank you for the question.
Okay. Next is Adam Rack.
Mayor Collins, members of the council. First of all, thank you for your service to our city. And thank you also for the thorough effort by the council to really educate the public on this issue. I mean, the fact that you have 80+% knowing about it is a good testament to your work here. I just want to say I think it's an important opportunity to preserve a significant amount of open space in our city for today, but also for future generations. And this, to me, is just the right thing to do. It should be a no-brainer, as was said before. And I would urge the council to place this on the ballot, then let the citizens decide whether you support it or not. Giving the citizens the opportunity, I think, is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Okay. Next is Camille King. Hi, Camille.
Thank you, City Council. My name is Camille King. I've lived here for 26 years. Both of my adult children and both of my grandchildren, age 4 and 6, live in San Carlos. So I'm heavily committed to the future of our town. And I'm very much in favor and optimistic about the city acquiring this beautiful piece of open space right in the heart of town for all generations. And I don't want my grandkids to say, Grandma, what were you thinking? Why didn't you do something about this in 10 or 20 years? So I encourage you to please vote to put it on the ballot. Thank you.
Thanks, Camille. Okay, next is it Donna Fields?
This, I don't know what I'm doing. I am neither for nor against this happening here, but I have a lot of questions. My husband and I moved here in about 1956, 57. We became very close to the Fallstitches and the Three Sisters Ranch. We were so close that we were in their houses that were built there, as far as I know, that we lost track of them in about the 60s and 70s. But there were three beautiful, beautiful houses. Mr. Fallstitch had one that the fireplace was taken from the 1906 earthquake. So there's a lot of stuff with this stuff. So I have questions. Would the three houses be destroyed? Or already are they? I don't know. I lost track. But the three houses that were there, are they destroyed or will they be? There were two roads going up, and I guess you'd have to improve those to accommodate Also, we had a lot of playing around doing with the whole area. Now, I'm a senior citizen right now, and I know I couldn't walk it right now. So how are you going to help it for the senior citizens? Okay, what else? Also, so if the taxes go along here, I'm in my 80s now. How does that affect me? Am I still on Prop 13, and how does that work for me? Can any of you guys answer my questions?
I can take a crack. You would be covered by Prop 13 in this bond measure, so whatever your assessed tax value is what the bond calculation would be, not the market property value that you would sell it for today. So the tax-based property.
What about the 3 houses that are there?
Well, I'm not totally sure if all 3 houses are original. I was under the impression that one house, the main house, was original, and the other 2, particularly the one down below, were newer homes. In terms of the park, the city doesn't have any specific plans for anything on the site. What we want to do is engage the community so that whatever elements of a park, be it preservation or roadway access or those kinds of things, are important to the community, is the type of park that we would build. We are sensitive to the fact that it's not a flat piece of property, and so we do know that we would like to make roadway improvements for traffic safety and pedestrian safety going up and back, and we know that we would like to have a couple of different parking areas so that folks who can't walk from the bottom to the top could still get to the various areas of the property and enjoy the picnicking and those kind of amenities that the park would provide. Did I get them all, or did I leave any out?
Well, I'm concerned about the 3 houses.
Mm-hmm. And that's great. And we would have we'd have a lot more meetings like this where we'd hear from folks before we make any decisions about what kind of park it is. So it's great feedback for us now. I'm sure the council appreciates it. I know the staff does, and we can register you as definitely a vote to preserve the houses that are the original historic buildings. So.
Well, I don't know. Anyway. I don't know whether I'll vote for it or against it, but I still have to hope my questions about the 3 houses. The roads are going to be a problem, and the terrain for senior citizens. I don't think it's going to. I couldn't do it now. I did in the 60s, but I couldn't now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Donna. All right. Next, we have Karen Molinari. Welcome back.
Hello, Mayor and Council members. As a third-generation San Carlin, raising the fourth generation of my family, and as a participant of the Fields Committee years ago, I've come to you many times in support of parks and open space and increasing access for everyone. This is an opportunity for us to create a legacy for our community, a 25-acre open space park for our existing and future residents to enjoy. As someone whose family has seen many changes over the years to this small community, I hope we will be able to secure this small piece of our town's history. I hope that you will allow the voters of San Carlos the opportunity to vote on this acquisition of Black Mountain Water Properties, and I hope my fellow residents are insightful enough to make this investment so that we aren't all saying, as we have many times before, I wish we would have done that. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Okay, next is Bob Black.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I'm Bob Black, and this month I celebrate my 50th year as a citizen of San Carlos. And I support this measure to have these 25 acres as a public park in San Carlos. It's our last best chance to try to get a little better balance between development and parks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, and finally, so far, David Crabb.
Yes, I'm in favor of the bond measure and let the citizens vote on it, and I hope they vote yes. This is a proposal for not just the people here in this room, but for the people in the future generations, great-grandchildren, children beyond that. They will have this legacy in their lives, and I think it's worth, we should be go ahead and do it. So vote yes.
Thank you, David. All right, is there anybody else that would like to speak? Come on up.
Thank you, Your Honor, and City Council members. I have two thoughts. First of all, I would like to say that my family came here to San Carlos in the early 1940s, and I've been here except for a brief departure since that time. Otherwise, I have no qualifications at all. The two thoughts that came to my mind, one was that would it be possible to consider splitting up a bond measure so that the first one was just secure the property, so we know nothing could happen to it that would be not an advantage, I feel, to San Carlos, such as development of more houses or apartment complexes or things in that order. And then this thought came up with one subject that has been addressed, and that's money. If the bond was split up in this way, perhaps less money could be asked for in the beginning, the first bond, I don't know. And then the second consideration I wanted to ask is, and this is an offshoot of somebody mentioning deer, which we find many deer on Club Drive and thereabouts. And I wonder if a consideration could be for an animal sanctuary. So these are my thoughts. Thank you for giving your attention to these thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn. All right. Jeff or Steve, can you just respond briefly to this question of splitting up the bond?
And Chick can augment this if he needs to, but the measure that's before the council tonight does establish a $45 million maximum, but it also does authorize the issuance of bonds in a series so that you do not have to issue the bonds in the full amount all at once. You could do it in portions if you want, up to the maximum.
Okay. And then the question about the animal sanctuary, I guess that would just be part of the planning processes, correct?
Yeah, I think issues with the deer, the animals, would be something that we would want to cover if the bond measure were successful and the city purchased the property as part of the planning phase for what kind of park it was, and that would be yet another idea for the community to consider as they voice their opinions about what type of park to make it.
All right. Okay, any other speakers on this item? All right, if not.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, you go.
Turn my light on so we can.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Matt.
There was a question that someone had raised, and I didn't hear anything from staff or anywhere regarding people on fixed income being able to delay payment until they sell their home. Do we have any kind of provision like that in the?
Yeah, the council could speak to this more, but just in general, we did look at that, and there really aren't provisions under the law with a bond measure to do that. And I think, the history, the legislative history of that may be the fact that Prop 13 provides, a differential already. So we did explore that with the subcommittee, and we couldn't find any examples of that, and ultimately decided that it would probably be risky on something like a bond measure to try to break new ground.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to close the public hearing.
I second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Crystal?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. All right. Now.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt Resolution 2015-82, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos determining that the public interest and necessity demand the acquisition and improvement of Black Mountain properties as a public park and their financing through the issuance of general obligation bonds.
Second.
Question procedurally for the mayor or for council is it contemplated that we would deal with these items separately or together? Because there is both a resolution
they would be considered separately.
Separately. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All right, any discussion? Okay. Crystal, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
And Mayor Collins?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor, I move to introduce ordinance number
1493.
1493, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos ordaining the submission of a proposition of incurring bonded debt to the qualified voters of the City of San Carlos at the general municipal election to be held on November 3rd, 2015 for the purpose of the acquisition and improvement of the Black Mountain properties as a public park.
Second.
All right, motion and second. Any discussion? All right, Crystal, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay. All right. All right. Moving on to item 9B, consideration of adopting a resolution approving participation in Pacific Gas and Electric Company's Sustainable Solutions Turnkey SST program for the Facilities Energy Conservation Improvements Project C9794 and authorizing the expenditure of a project budget with contingencies and authorizing the city manager to execute agreements as necessary to complete the work. Mr. Walter.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Could we get our council back first?
Oh, yes.
Mr. Rubens is
Somebody
fighting his way
want
back
to bring Mr. Rubens back? Oh, there he is. He's eagerly awaiting his return.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
It's all right. Sorry, Mr. Walter.
I promise this is just as exciting.
And the audience feels the same way. All right. I don't think we need to wait for Jeff, do we? We got everybody here? All right.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Jay Walter, Public Works Director. And tonight we have for your consideration the Facility Energy Upgrade Project, which is a project that we've been working on for quite a number of months with PG&E and other organizations in order to save lots of money. So that's one of the key components of this. So a little bit of background. We worked with San Mateo County Energy Watch since May of 2013 on the idea that we would do an evaluation of each of our city facilities, looking for ways to decrease energy usage and save energy costs. And again, working with PG&E, our primary electrical and gas provider, and a company called Comfort International since August of 2014 to perform an assessment, a further assessment and refinement of that information so we could really get down to where we can save. So we focused on our key city facilities as listed there. And as you'll note, the Adult Community Center was included in the assessment, but because we had the renovation project moving forward, that project will go ahead and make the energy upgrades as part of the renovation project. So tonight, this project does not include anything at the ACC because that's already being taken care of. This work is consistent with our climate action plan with the goals to reduce greenhouse gases and find ways that we can continue to achieve further reductions with our facilities. This is one of the key areas that we can do work. So the project itself essentially involves three main components at each facility. The HVAC controls, we're going to gain better integration between the heating and cooling needs at these locations with controls. The controls that we have now are older and not up to the task that we need to have for very good energy efficiency. The lighting at each of the facilities, we will be retrofitting with LED lighting technology with motion sensors, and this includes the parking garages that we have here at City Hall as well as in the library. One of the things the council will remember is about a year ago we came to you with a project to retrofit our street lights with LED street lights. That project is largely complete with a couple of exceptions with sections where the circuitry was not quite right, but we're working on that. So we have good track record with this LED lighting and the program that PG&E provides to be able to do this work. And then lastly, we will be updating the HVAC equipment itself to the latest technology with different physical units, and some of the units that we have at these facilities are older and relatively at the end of their useful life. There was a consideration to replace components within the units. That did not prove feasible, and we were able to include this work as part of the project. So the PG&E turnkey program, that's a part of the staff report information there. We call it a one-stop shop. They design, construct, and dispose of all the old equipment. PG&E modifies the billing rate and completes all the paperwork for us. And we have the example of the streetlight project, which went forward very smoothly with PG&E. The energy rebates and on-bill financing program, which we'll be implementing again. In this project, we qualified for about $100,000 in rebates of various types for the improvements we're going to make. The cost of the project is spread out over about 8 years, and that's paid for in the energy savings that we achieve. The city, as an organization, has the ability to borrow up to $1 million in on-bill financing. We did borrow $250,000 for the streetlights, and so now we're going to move forward with the other $750,000, and we pay that back. It's an interest-free loan. We pay that back via our PG&E bills that we have for the next 8 years. As far as project costs, you can see the breakdown here, the net estimated cost minus the rebates, and then the split between the on-bill financing and the CIP project, which covers the remainder of the costs. The CIP project was one that had at least 3, maybe 4 separate projects initially that had been contemplated for a number of years. We went ahead and consolidated those into one project at the mid-year budget cycle and asked for some additional funding so that we could accomplish this project in one fell swoop. And again, our energy cost savings, as you can see, $264,000 per year from each of these facilities. The procurement process, which is a reason for the public hearing tonight, we normally go through the design, bid, and build process, which we would prepare plans and specifications, put them out to bid, and then have to take the low bidder for the project award. The government code has a special section that allows cities to streamline the process for energy-type projects when deemed in the best interest of the city. And that's part of the resolution that you'll be adopting tonight, that particular language. Now look at the energy impact. $264,000 in annual energy cost savings, over 1 million kilowatt hours of electricity savings per year, 52,000 therms of gas savings, and over almost 2.5 million pounds of CO2 reduction. So I guess I would say that our facilities right now are woefully inadequate in terms of their energy efficiency. And so that's really the main reason right there that we would be moving forward with this project. And again, the greenhouse gas emissions saved equivalent to removing 220 cars from the road. The CO2 emissions save nearly 100 homes, carbon sequestered equivalent to 857 acres of U.S. forest. So tonight we're asking you to adopt a resolution approving this turnkey project with PG&E and that we can expend the project budget as noted, and we're asking for the city manager to be able to execute the necessary agreements, the on-bill financing agreement and the purchase order, which will be part of the project. And the next steps as we execute the on-bill finance agreement and the PG&E work order, the project is likely to start within about 30 days after we get those signed, subject to equipment acquisition. So we'll have some of the project locations which will be able to be worked on very quickly. Others will take a little bit longer based on the type of equipment that has to be acquired. So with that, I'll be able to take questions.
All right. Thanks, Jay. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jay. Good presentation, as always. Just a quick question. When I was looking at the staff report, some of the facilities that are targeted for making these improvement investments in are also facilities, I'm thinking specifically of Station 16, Fire Station 16, are also facilities that certainly have been reasonably high up on the radar of doing some major remodeling on and/or tearing down or replacing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So how is staff going to factor those kind of considerations into deciding which, whether or not it's worth investing in a 6 or 7 year payout kind of investment?
Well, as far as I know, there's been some discussion on Station 16 as it relates to fire station consolidation, but it hasn't moved along very far in terms of being able to determine a final location and where that might be and when that might occur. So one of the things that we've been looking at is ways that we can begin to save energy now. And by making the retrofits that we're talking about, these are not ones which will take a long period of time, nor will they involve a significant remodeling effort or rebuilding effort, so we can begin to quickly see these savings. So as far as the fire station goes, I would predict that probably by the time we would see a consolidated fire station, it might be at least 6 years down the road. So my feeling is that we will get great advantage out of these improvements, even in some of these buildings which may or may not have a future in San Carlos as yet to be determined.
Given a 6-year horizon, I think I would certainly share your perspective on this, because I think some of the payback periods I was looking at were like around 8 years, and that's close enough to 6 that it's kind of hard to argue. But I'll just make the note in passing that I kind of hope that we'll move a little faster than that, particularly on Station 16, for a bunch of reasons, not the least of which it's not the most earthquake-safe building in the world. So let me just leave it with, it sounds like staff is aware of this issue and is thinking about it, and just, I would be fine if staff doesn't end up at the end of the day investing in certain particular areas just because they determine that it doesn't make good sense from a financial point of view.
Okay, Matt?
Well, I had a similar question, and I had on my list Station 16, but also Loreola Park Building, because that one especially, I don't know where we are with master planning the parks, but I know that building has come up before. It's ADA non-compliant and so forth, so I'd hate to invest in it and then.
Well, one of the things with the Loreola building in particular now is it has no functioning AC. We run a lot of programs out of that building, and I know, having been in there on a few nights when it was a pretty warm day, that building is not cool. And I don't mean that from a really cool place, but literally not cool. And so this investment, I think, is really going to pay for, or it's going to benefit the continued users of that facility. And since we have such good use of that facility, I think these are important upgrades to make. So again, master planning, that all takes a long time, as does the eventual design and construction of new facilities. So my sense is, again, that these are relatively quick hits and short payback periods that we can really gain some good energy efficiency on and real benefit to the users of the building.
Is there a quick comment from either of you about the duration of that particular building?
Christine Boland, Parks and Recreation Director. Councilmember Grocott, the building has been discussed in the past, and it is old. Director Walter is right. It is warm in there. However, we're running preschool, so in the mornings, by noon it adjourns, so it's tolerable. But if there are evening programs in there, it can be quite sticky.
Specifically, my question, what I'm looking for is a parallel to Station 16. Mr. Walter said 6 years is probably, hopefully within the 6-year time period. Mark was saying hopefully earlier, and I would agree, to have that station rebuilt. Or if it's part of a consolidation, it's just gone. The Loreola Park Building, what are we looking at on that? 6 years as well or something? Or do we know? Do we have any idea?
The age?
No, I don't care how old it is.
What's the future? What's the future of the building?
I believe it remains on unfunded list, and if I'm not mistaken, with the Transit Village project, those funds are dedicated to a park and lieu fund, which would essentially replace the building. That's our intention anyway.
Okay, so it's out there a little bit then.
Yeah, that's correct. But the three facilities that are most likely to be completely replaced in San Carlos, let's say in the next 10 to 15 years, would be the Kiwanis building at Burton, the Loreola building at Loreola Park, and of course Station 16. So.
Okay. Good enough. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Jay or staff? Okay. This is a public hearing. And I don't have any speaker slips, but is there anybody who would like to speak? Seeing none.
Mr. Mayor, I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Crystal?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
And Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay, moving on to item 9.
Well, no, wait a minute.
Apology.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a motion?
Yes, please.
Thank
Please
you.
do. Save me from myself.
I move to adopt Resolution 2015-83,
83.
a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos approving participation in Pacific Gas and Electric Company's, PG&E, Sustainable Solutions Turnkey, SST, program for the Facilities Energy Conservation Improvements Project C9794, authorizing the expenditure of a project budget with contingencies, and authorizing the city manager to execute agreements as necessary to complete the work.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, Crystal, please call the roll.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. And now, move. And what's that?
One more public hearing.
All right, item 9C. Consideration of adopting a resolution approving the placement of sidewalk repair charges on the property tax roll pursuant to Section 12.04.030 of the San Carlos Municipal Code. Mr. Walter again.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, Jay Walter, Public Works Director. For this sidewalk item, Grace Lee, City Engineer, will make the presentation, and we'll both be available for questions if you have them at that point in time.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Grace Lee, City Engineer. Per our city's municipal code, sidewalk maintenance is the responsibility of the adjacent property owners. However, both the city and the property owners have joint interest in reducing trip hazards. Therefore, the city has a city sidewalk repair program to facilitate repairs. As part of the program, the city will identify needed repairs and contract with the contractor to perform the repairs. Property owners will reimburse the city for the actual cost of repairs. Some of the advantages of participating into the city sidewalk program are that property owners don't have to pull permits and they don't have to have their own contractor do the work. Also, because work is done in bulk, usually the prices are reduced. But the property owners do have the choice to opt out and do the work themselves, but they have to be specifically stating that they will opt out and that they will do the work, the contractor will do the work within 30 days. And even before the work's done, the city will send a cost estimate to the property owners. And when the contractor is on board, the city will send a confirmed cost. After the work's done, an initial invoice is sent from finance. If that invoice isn't paid, a second invoice with a delinquent notice will be sent out. And if that's still outstanding, a letter from the clerk's office informing the property owner of the public hearing and the possibility of placing the charges on the county tax roll. Today's recommendation for the council is to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution approving the placement of sidewalk repair charges on the property tax roll. I do have an update for council, and that is the count for properties with outstanding charges is 3 instead of the 5 stated on the staff report. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions or comments.
All right. Thank you, Grace. Bob?
Grace, let's assume that the person decides that they're going to do it themselves. Mm-hmm. They notify the city. How much time do they have to do it?
So previously it's 10 days, but because of the ordinance amendment that we recently did, it'd be 30 days.
Okay. So after 30 days, they haven't done it. Then what happens?
Then it goes into code enforcement mode.
Okay. And then what happens?
Because the ultimate goal is to have the repairs done, it's a liability if it's not. So we would continue to have enforce it and have the
No,
property owner.
I'm not going to put you on the spot, but code enforcement to me equates to long times, okay, because it's a difficult situation. So I guess I'm trying to say, if I'm a homeowner, I could, if I want to game the system, it sounds like I say I'll do it myself and it'll take 6 months before you get to me, or is it going to be an expedited process?
No, it would be the 30 days. We'll send it right away to code enforcement, and the code enforcement has a process that they go through.
I know.
Yeah.
But it's a long process. At least in my experience, it's a long process. That's what I'm saying. Are we going to have anything to isolate these items so that code enforcement gets on it in 30 days as opposed to 60, 90, or 120? Maybe. I'm sorry.
Councilmember Grisilli, our procedure is if someone opts out and says they're going to do it themselves and they don't, I guess that's your question.
Right.
Once the referral gets to our office, we've been successful in either obtaining compliance through administrative code process or actually. We have in our ordinance, we have a process, and I think it's about 30 or 45 days to get through the process, which would enable us to force the repairs, and then we can put a lien on the property as a result of that.
Okay, you understand where I'm going. Most code enforcement takes a long, long time. Yeah. When I heard those two words together, that means I can sit there for 6 or 9 months. And that's why I'm asking if this is, obviously you're telling me this is a specialized thing, so it's code enforcement with a little bit of an asterisk.
This is a code enforcement process within our municipal code. It's not the type of code enforcement that requires us to go to Superior Court to get compliance.
So it's a different kind. Yes. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Grace, because I could just see what could happen otherwise. Okay, thank you.
All right, Cameron.
Thanks, Grace. So just to clarify, we're not being asked to change policy tonight.
No, you're not.
Okay, so what we're asking is basically to have 3 people who have been invoiced to put those invoices and get it through property taxes.
Right, to put the charges on the property tax. And that's per our municipal code, so it's not changing policy.
Okay. And we did the same thing last year. I remember we've probably done it every year. And I remember last year there were a couple individuals here who kind of came in at the last minute and talked about their specific circumstances. So for the 3 individuals who haven't paid, is there any nuance or any anecdotes you want to share about their circumstances, or it's pretty cut and dried cases?
All 3 cases are pretty cut and dry. There's one case that we've been contacted saying that they think the sidewalk is due to a sewer lateral repair, but we have evidence showing and we got back to the property owner saying that it's not due to the sewer repair because he thought the sewer repair made the sidewalk settle, but the sidewalk hasn't settled. It's actually upheaved. Another section of the sidewalk upheaved. Mm-hmm. And we have pictures, and we've contacted the property owner, explained the reasoning, and so forth.
And, I mean, we're talking about a total of a couple $1,000s. Is this something that state law or our law requires us to deal with every year? It can't just be something that's forwarded on like any other fine?
It's in our ordinance to go through this procedure, the public hearing, and so forth.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay. I don't see any other questions at the moment, so thank you, Grace. This is a public hearing. I don't have any speaker. Well, I guess I do now. Come on up.
Good evening again. I hadn't expected to address this. It turns out we actually are going through the process of fixing our sidewalk. This is, I guess, by way of a comment, I'm thinking about Mr. Grisilli's of timeliness of process. It is a danger, of course. We're going to address it at our property. I have to say that I was not terribly impressed with the speed of the city's sidewalk program. I called the city, I don't know, a few months ago and said, gosh, I guess I need some work. I guess you got some kind of a program. They said, well, 2 or 3 months from now, we'll come out and mark. And that occurred 2 or 3 months later. I got a letter saying, here are the repairs. It's, I don't know, $1,300, something like that. And oh, by the way, the city program won't get around to fixing it until the end of the year. So I'm actually out, trying to get a contractor to address it far more quickly. So I'm sure you guys, worry about this and work on it as best you can. But the speed of the process is less than impressive. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Jay, did you want to just give us a little, some more information on that?
I do. Thanks, Mr. Mayor, members of council. In regards to the comment regarding the timeliness of the program, to a degree I can understand some frustration in that regard. However, the city endeavors to do this project one time per year, the annual sidewalk program, and so we do we get a regular flow of complaints, concerns, and locations brought to our attention that we go out and mark, and we notice the property owners. We let them know of the availability of the program and then approximately when that's going to be. So typically we'll do this work once a year. However, we've been finding that because of the fact that we only do it once a year and we have so many locations, we recently have had a contract that we're going to go through with an on-call. So we can do this regularly throughout the year rather than waiting until we batch up, 150 locations and do them only once every 12 months. So we believe we'll have some flexibility and some efficiency and a little more speed with this, and particularly in the cases of ones that are very egregious and large defects that somehow have managed to escape attention until a certain time, we can have a contractor that can get to it right away. So I believe we're making strides in the right direction in that regard.
Go ahead, Bob.
Do we have the program in place now, or is it still in process?
That's the go ahead, Grace.
We do have the on-call program in place. That was approved by council, a few council.
Okay, so Mr. Mikulski could theoretically get a better deal then, maybe. I got a letter. Yeah, no, I know you got a letter. It won't happen until. But that's what I'm asking. What's the timing then?
So we just got the on-call.
On-call mean, I guess.
On-call is we're going to go out to bid and get a contractor, and the contractor will be on-call for the 2 years. We'll package the task order together.
Yes, I know.
So the timing is we haven't gone out to.
You haven't got a contractor for the on-call yet.
Yes, we still have to secure the contractor.
That's what I misunderstood. Right. I'm sorry. I thought you said it's all set, and it's not all set. You haven't got a contractor yet. Okay,
We
I
still
got
have
you.
to get a contractor.
All right, so this is really what we're trying to do. It sounds like the change is to make it an ongoing program. Is that right?
So we can bunch up enough task orders and send out task orders during that 2-year process, so we don't have to wait till we go out to bid and get a contractor on board.
Right.
So hopefully that'd be more a quicker process. And I was told that I do need to read out the 3 properties that will be sent onto the property tax roll. So I'll read the property address, which is 1143 San Carlos Avenue, 1972 San Carlos Avenue, and 2173 Carmelita.
And Mr. Mayor, the reason for this is the attachment 2 to the resolution, which specifically identifies the property, will be changed to reflect those 3 properties.
So yeah, that's what I was just looking at, and you were naming different properties. So some of them paid, I assume.
Right. So at the time the staff report was written, there were 5 outstanding charges, but since then 2 has made payment, so we have 3 left.
Okay, great, making progress then. All right.
Mr. Mayor, I move to close the public hearing.
All right, let me, just before we do that, I just want to make sure, ask if there was anybody else who wanted to speak. Okay.
John wants to come up one more time.
I again move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to close the public hearing. Crystal?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes.
And I move to adopt Resolution 2015-84,
84.
resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos approving the placement of sidewalk repair charges on the property tax roll pursuant to Section 12.04.030 of the San Carlos Municipal Code.
All right, is there a second? Okay. Any more discussion on this item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to indicate that I am going to be voting against this adoption. I actually don't have a problem with the idea of collecting the fees that the city is owed for having the work that's done. This is more, for me, as I've brought up in the past, that I think that given the current state of the economic environment and the relatively good situation that the city budget is in, and the fact that this is very clearly, sidewalk repair and maintenance is very clearly a shared benefit for both the property owner and the larger community, that I think that there ought to be a sharing of of costs between the community and the individual property owner. I think in the past I've proposed a 50-50 split. I certainly can be amenable to something other than 50-50, but that's why I'm going to be voting against it.
Okay. Matt?
Ditto.
Okay. All right. If there's no other discussion, Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
No.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. All right. Moving on to new business. Consideration of introducing an ordinance amending Municipal Code Title 15, Buildings and Construction, to provide an expedited, streamlined permitting process for small residential rooftop solar systems. Chris Valley, welcome.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of Council. Chris Valley, building official. In September 2014, Governor Brown approved Assembly Bill AB 2188, which requires cities and counties to adopt on or before September 30th of this year an expedited, streamlined permitting process for small residential rooftop systems. AB 2188 requires expedited permit review and issuance. We currently have a 1 to 3 day turnaround time for both residential and commercial solar. A streamlined inspection process. The building division requires one inspection currently, with follow-up inspections or inspections if there are deficiencies noted in the field. Electronic application submittal via email or the internet. Currently, contractors may submit plans via our new solar permits email address, solarpermits@cityofsancarlos.org. Applicants can pay for their permit via the internet or provide their credit card information on the application form, which we'll shred later on. We now have separate solar permitting link on the building division's website that will have all information provided in the ordinance on a later date. Other bullet point item is standardized permit application. Our current application that we have online suffices for that. AB 2188 requires standardized checklists and sample plans as provided in this evening's packet to council. And last but not least, reasonable permit fees. Our current fees are $198 for residential and $286 for commercial solar. As stated in my staff report, while AB 2188 requires adoption of this ordinance, the outcome for the San Carlos will simply memorialize current practices and procedures for solar permitting, both for residential and commercial. And as a side note, in 2014, we issued 144 residential solar permits. This year in 2015, we're up to 115 permits already. And since 2010, we've issued 469 residential permits and 4 commercial permits. And I'm available for questions if you have any.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chris. Just a quick question. I've had earlier conversations with staff prior to this meeting about how this isn't going to have a significant impact on San Carlos because we were already, I guess, compliant with the essence of what the state was doing. I just want to confirm that is in fact the case, right?
That is the case, yes.
In which case, congratulations, good on staff for doing that. I like to hear that I like to hear the state is finally catching up with trying to be as efficient as we are.
Thank you.
Cameron.
I echo what Mark said. I raised in a previous conversation, or I think it was a previous item several months ago, the idea of reducing fees. The $198 for residential. So the reason I think we should reduce fees is, could provide some marginal encouragement, and it's also symbolic at a time when we're trying to encourage energy efficiency. Fees from solar panels is negligible to the city's budget. The current $198, is that full cost recovery, or is it already include a subsidy?
It's more of a, we're still somewhat subsidizing the application and plan review and inspection process, that fee.
Yeah, and I guess my view of it is if we're not if we're already subsidizing, why not subsidize it more? So I'm not going to push it tonight, but I hope it's something that when we look at the fee schedule next year, we can bring it up, and I will certainly bring it up at looking at, potentially making it like a $99 fee or something like that, that we can continue to try and push for more residential solar. So thanks.
Okay, Matt.
To the fee schedule, Mr. Rubens, yeah, no, that's right. We have to be careful on subsidy measures like that when we're dealing with fees.
Well, the issue is whether or not the subsidy could be considered a gift to public funds, and when you identify a public purpose, you do not have to, that concern goes away because you've specifically addressed it in the resolution or the finding. So when you set the fee schedule, for example, you're allowed to, in those fees, you can set a subsidy, but in the staff report or the materials, you'll have to identify the public purpose you're trying to achieve.
And just one question for Mr. Valley. Have you had any conversations with the fire department regarding their concerns with solar panels?
Yes, I have. Jim Polisi specifically, regarding their review of the applications. We don't have this written in stone, of course, but he's got full confidence that the billing division may do that on their behalf.
And last question, the concern of of neighbors and so forth with panels going in and the manner in which they're going in. Has the city staff gotten any complaints about that?
I've received in my 18 years here, maybe 2 or 3 complaints.
Yeah. Okay.
And the solar industry kind of takes precedent with regard to location on the rooftop. I should say the location of the panels take precedent due to sunlight and so forth. So I do recall it might have been Palo Alto where a neighbor had to actually cut down their trees to allow for direct sunlight to the adjacent neighbor's solar system. That's the kind of laws that are in place for solar installations. Haven't had to deal with that yet here.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Would anyone like to speak on this item? All right. Seeing none.
Mr. Mayor, I move to introduce ordinance number
1494.
1494, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos, amending Municipal Code Title 15 Buildings and Construction to provide an expedited, streamlined permitting process for small residential rooftop solar systems.
I second.
All right. Motion and second. Any discussion, Matt?
I'm going to actually be voting against this because what I'm seeing in the solar industry is, I don't know how to term these, sort of a slapjack job of putting solar panels on homes. I had a client of mine, a guy who I did a remodel for, designed his remodel and everything. And after the job was finished, he decided to go with solar, called a company. They designed it, standard forms and drawings that they give them. And what he ended up with, and the look of it, the conduit running across his roof and so forth, he was not pleased when he came home. And I just think there's a little bit too much of that going on right now. I think the solar industry, while I agree with it, and I want to see us go with solar to augment power in homes, I think it's getting a little loosey-goosey out there, and rather than loosen up things, I think we need to actually do the opposite and tighten up and require more of these companies with what they're providing, the designs they're providing, and where they're recommending things to go on rooftops. I've seen some, like I said, some pretty poor-looking work out there, so I'm going to vote against it.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. Crystal, please call the roll.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. All right. Moving on to item 10B, consideration of adopting a resolution agreeing to the share in the cost of crossing guards with the San Carlos School District and appropriating $6,657 for this purpose. Mr. Walter, once more.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Jay Walter, Public Works Director. Tonight, and I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but just brought this item for council's action tonight as the continuation of a successful partnership with the San Carlos School District. In the past, the council agreed to share the cost of crossing guards that the school district hired and placed at the intersection of San Carlos Avenue, Club, and Dartmouth, and then at the intersection of Arroyo and Cedar. Both locations very well received, and traffic, I should say, driver behavior and pedestrian behavior has noticeably improved. And so at the 2+2 meeting, it was suggested by council to share. There was another location identified, and so tonight we're bringing to you this item to add $6,600 to our current agreement so the school district can provide another crossing guard at the intersection of Britton and Cedar. And tonight in the audience, Robert Porter, the COO of the school district, is here, so he may want to make a comment or two if you have questions in regards to the school district. But I'll leave it to you now. Recommendation is to approve this agreement in the amount of $6,657.
All right. Thanks, Jay. Any questions for Jay or Robert Porter? Robert, is there anything you wanted to add to Jay's comments? Always nice to hear from the school district.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor and council members. No, just I would note in our Four Corners studies groups, we had a number of citizens and local neighbors comment about how much they appreciated the crossing guards in terms of helping the pedestrian traffic around there. And the reason the Cedar Britton intersection was identified was we were hearing a lot in terms of both the heavy vehicular traffic and pedestrian traffic in terms of backing up and causing problems in terms of, okay, who is crossing at what point and some kind of disconnection there. So we'll be providing traffic guard service at that intersection.
Okay.
That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a couple speaker cards. Karen Molinari. You're a busy lady tonight.
Meeting. How did I score so lucky? Hello, Mayor and council members again. My last time speaking with you this evening. As a member of the PTA Coordinating Council Traffic and Safety Committee, we've been participating with the school district, the city council, and Samtrans to address the issue of traffic safety around our extremely congested school sites. I have to tell you, I'm so pleased with the collaborative effort between our city, our school district, and our PTAs to secure the funds for this much needed and very successful school guard crossing program at Central and at Terra Linda and the Charter Learning Center campus. I hope you will support this effort to expand the program. I think it has greatly improved the flow of traffic and definitely increased the number of families that are choosing to have their children walk to school versus drive. And I have to tell you that our crossing guard at San Carlos Avenue in Dartmouth, Edward, has become a beloved member of our school community. The kids just love him, and so do the parents. So I hope it continues.
Thanks, Karen. Adam Rack.
Since I'm here today, I figured I would stay and do this one as well. So on behalf of the school district, just want to thank the council for their support of this in the past and hope you'll continue to do so in the future. It's been a great partnership on a key issue of traffic and safety. I know that speaking from someone who has kids who walk to Britton Acres, it's been a huge difference having a traffic guard there to keep the flow going, and I think it's just a great, you don't try to duck out and see if you can make the crossing or not. You know when to go, and kids are doing a good job of obeying that as well. So thank you for considering and hope you'll support it.
Thanks, Adam. All right, would anyone else like to speak on this matter? All right.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt Resolution 2015-85, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos agreeing to share in the cost of crossing guards with the San Carlos School District and appropriating $6,657 for this purpose.
Second. All right. Motion and second. Any comments or discussion? Matt?
Just quickly, I think, there have been other projects that we've worked with the school district on. Some have been contentious over the years, or we've tried to pull ourselves out of, like the program for tutoring. And I think in that regard, that's an education process. So to me, I see that differently, and that is something that while I fully support the tutoring program, wanted to see us extract ourselves from. But in this case, what we're talking about is public safety, traffic, and it's a little bit like, I think, what Mr. Olbert was saying earlier about sidewalks. You have the sidewalk in front of your house, but it's not fully your responsibility, and neither is getting kids to school and moving traffic around fully the responsibility of the school district. It's something that we share as a city. So I think ongoing support of this type of thing is a good thing.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Crystal, please call the roll.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Olbert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay, item 10C, consideration of introducing an ordinance amending San Carlos Municipal Code Chapter 12.260, regulation of park facilities, smoking. Christine.
Good evening again, Mayor Collins, members of the City Council, Christine Bowen, Parks and Recreation Director. Quickly, for the record, I wanted to inform you I did not pay Karen Molinari for those previous comments.
Sure.
Just a quick background on our smoking ordinance. Back in 1993, former city attorney Bob Lanzone established a comprehensive prohibition on smoking in offices, restaurants, bars, and et cetera, many public places in San Carlos, followed by 2004. An extension was inserted into Chapter 1212, which prohibited smoking within 25 feet of playgrounds, on athletic fields, and trails. And quickly, I just wanted to say in this position, I've received probably a couple complaints every month or two from residents, businesses, and children, actually, down at Burton Park regarding secondhand smoke, trash, litter, and kind of a concentration in our smaller parks, lots of smokers. Also, the reason I'm bringing this to you this evening is for the recent drought and potential fire danger in our parks. Our current ordinance reads, 12.260 reads, smoking is prohibited again in any park facility area designated as an athletic field, spectator areas, nature trail, or within 25 feet of a playground or sandbox area. Our recommendation this evening is to expand that current prohibition to public areas, including all parks and outdoor facilities owned or controlled by the city, sports fields or stadiums, dog parks, entrances, exits, trails, playgrounds, easements, pathways, music venues, grass or turf fields, water features, play areas, driveways, ramps, located in or on such public places, city-owned or private open space areas identified in the city's general plan. There's also a provision in the proposed ordinance to allow the city manager or his or her designee to establish limited areas as designated as smoking. That's up to the city manager. This proposed ordinance is also endorsed by our fire chief, deputy fire chief, and fire marshal for obvious reasons. And fiscal implications are very low, under $1,000, which is in the Public Works budget, I might mention. That basically concludes my presentation. And just a quick note, signage is there if you read it. We're hoping that it's a self-regulated prohibition in parks. Of course, we'll also use our social media outlets to get the word out if approved by the council.
All right, thanks,
Happy to answer
Christine.
questions.
Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Christine. A couple of questions. Triggering off one of your last comments there, Christine. So I take it that there aren't any specifically identified enforcement resources that we are going to approve allocating time of police deputies basically to be enforcing these rules.
No, I think that's virtually impossible, but we do have spot checking by parks personnel. Recreation staff does check parks periodically. If there is an issue, we can report it to the police, but it really is a self-regulation type of ordinance.
I recall you saying that. Personally, my sense is when it comes to something like smoking, which I know there are different opinions about this, I personally tend to view it as having somewhat of an addictive component to it for the people who smoke. That may not be enough to actually achieve what we're trying to achieve. So I leave that with staff that as always, putting ordinances in place is one thing. They almost always have to have some kind of enforcement resources behind them.
Yeah, speaking, there are certain instances that we're aware of in town where it's become a real problem, and we get a lot of complaints, and we witness it quite frequently. And in fact, I can tell you we've had the deputies in City Hall Park probably on half a dozen occasions just in the last 2 months.
So effectively, you do deploy the resources on an as-needed basis. Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure the resources are available because I think you're going to have to do that. My other question is a little bit more of a process orientation. When I saw this come up on the agenda, Jeff and I have talked about this, I actually was a little surprised in the sense that I've gotten, in the 4 years that I've been on the council, I've gotten occasional emails from people talking about this particular topic, but I'd have to say occasional is probably like 2. And yet staff is saying that this happens, you hear fairly significantly, frequently from folks. So do we have a process in place for, as you guys are getting these kinds of issues and complaints, that on some semi-annual or annual basis you report back to us on here's what we're learning? Because that would be useful to me. Not that I have any problem with the ordinances coming forward, but it actually would be more helpful to me to hear what the pulse of the community is rather than just see the ordinance pop up and sort of go, where'd that come from?
Sure, and I think our new citizen relationship management system that's just been deployed is really going to be able to allow us to provide the council on an annual basis with sort of the, maybe not hot topics, because you guys hear very frequently about the hot topics, but what's just sort of simmering underneath that the staff is hearing about that maybe don't rise to the level of somebody wanting to send an email to their elected official, but they're more than happy to mention it to the staff when they come in contact with us, maybe on something else.
That would be great, at least from my point of view. I won't speak for anybody else. Thank you.
All right, Cameron?
Thanks, Christine. So the definition here, it says all parks and outdoor facilities owned or controlled by the city. Does that include benches on Laurel Street?
It certainly could, yes.
It could or it does?
That's a good question. I'll defer to the person who wrote the actual ordinance.
I do. This is covering park facilities. It's not covering general sidewalk areas and those types of areas, but it would cover like a plaza if we had like downtown park or where there's benches there. That's included. That's the public place. But some of the benches that are just near a bus stop or on Laurel Street or something, they're not intended to be covered by this.
Right, or the planters along downtown.
Well, those are, that's part of the sidewalk area, I would think. So we were intending to cover the park facilities because remember the core ordinance talked about the athletic fields and playground areas. So we expanded that to include those types of areas.
Okay, and then you talked about litter being one of the concerns, but I assume it's already against the municipal code to litter.
Yes.
So is it really just about secondhand smoke? Is that the concern?
No, it's secondhand smoke, litter, and just the concentration in certain areas in the smaller parks. Also in the athletic fields, folks feel that they can step out of the immediate area of the ball game and light up. Right.
I mean, it's not illegal to smoke. And the question I have is, so litter is already illegal, right? So by adopting this ordinance, we're not outlawing litter because litter is already outlawed. Is that right?
Yes.
Correct. So the concern is about secondhand smoke, is that?
That is one of the concerns, yes.
Yeah, secondhand smoke and the public's enjoyment of the park without being exposed to the odor of smoke and those kinds of things in a public place. Also, and this is definitely to a lesser degree, but in areas where, we've had groups of smokers really congregate on a regular basis, there tends to be associated vandalism with that, like you'd see on buses back in the day with the burning and melting of signs and picnic tables and that kind of thing as well.
And, okay. I guess, I suspect that this ordinance would be very popular in the city, but I think one of our responsibilities is to protect minority rights, and it is not illegal to smoke, and you cannot smoke in restaurants, and you can't smoke in parks. There's a push to ban smoking in multi-unit buildings, as they've done in Belmont. At a certain point, you're fundamentally infringing upon somebody's right to do something that is not illegal, unless you want to go out and ban it outright, which no one seems to want to do. So, but you're saying at this point you can still walk down the street in San Carlos and smoke?
Yes.
It's just if you enter a public park. Okay.
Councilmember Johnson, one other anecdote is fire danger. I've seen older teens, I guess young adults, light up in the middle of parks, and it's quite disturbing on the weekend when I'm down there. So I think while it's not illegal to smoke, to move the folks out to perhaps a sidewalk or a safer area than in the middle of the grass, which with one match could be detrimental to the city.
I guess I mean we could get into a much longer conversation. I feel like I've burned up too much time already, but I'm not, no pun intended, I'm not really persuaded by the idea, Jeff, your comment that we don't want, young people to congregate, so we're going to ban smoking, or we don't want people to start fires, so we're going to ban smoking. I mean, it's illegal to start a fire, it's illegal to vandalize things. These are precursor activities, maybe, but the underlying thing that you're trying to stop is already not permitted. So I'm not sure why you would say, here's an activity that people are engaging in, they shouldn't be allowed to do it. So,
well, I can say that one of the things that we've seen in the last couple of years that I think is partly what's driven the increase in complaints, certainly driven the increase in what we've seen at City Hall, are people who are coming from outside the community, and they're spending all day in a park, or in groups of people who are from outside the city, and they're chain smoking all day, and all those other ancillary activities are occurring as well.
Okay. One last question. Does it apply to electronic cigarettes as well as traditional cigarettes?
I believe the definition of smoking could be construed as electronic cigarettes.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Matt?
So the only question I have is, of city facilities, given what was done by Mr. Lanzone years ago, and now what you're doing with this cleanup measure, what's left of city property where one could smoke? Anywhere?
What's left of city property? Well, certainly sidewalks, public right-of-way, basically outdoors.
I guess what I'm thinking of is, you've got City Hall, you've got the library, you got the youth center, you got, these other buildings. They're considered, I know they're kind of under your budget, so are they considered part of the Parks and Rec system, and this would apply to all those facilities?
Yes, but it's currently not legal to smoke within 25 feet of those facilities. So
the reason I'm asking the question is I'm not just asking questions just to ask, but it seems to me because of what Mr. Lanzone did, and now what you're doing now, it's a little bit like patchwork, and it leaves one to question the question that I asked. And it would seem to me more reasonable. I mean, I'm going to vote for this, but what I would really like to see, Mr. Rubens, is something that comes to us that just says, if it's a city-owned facility, I don't care if it's a park, if it's a civic building, whatever, we just don't allow smoking in our facilities, top to bottom, soup to nuts, and be done with it, rather than have this stuff that's kind of, well, we added this and then we added that, and so that's what I would like to see at some point, I guess.
All right, any other questions? Is there anyone that would like to speak on this matter?
Can I just clarify one point from Councilman Grocott? Just to be clear, city-owned facilities are included in this. So, and now it's any city-owned facility, city-owned property. It's included. So everything from City Hall Park to Frank Harrington Park to a future plaza that you may put in place that's proposed for around Wheeler Plaza. Any public place like that is covered by this. What I think is not covered is the public streets or just a bench that happens to be in a public street. And then I'll just add that one of the suggestions staff and I had in drafting it was to come up with this concept of a smoking area. So there is an escape clause. If we have a public facility or plaza where it's large enough and there is, we're dealing with an enforcement issue there that just seems to call out for having a smoking area. We've added some flexibility for that to be allowed. But this is really intended to address that hole that we had in the prior ordinance, that we did not have all the public facilities covered. We could, the list that we have there is not comprehensive. It's a list that we tried to capture most of the areas where we foresee problems or might have problems. But again, there may be other areas or facilities that we have, but they're all intended to be included in the banned public facilities.
If I may engage, that's why I'm saying if we had something that was just much more simple that said, if it's a city-owned facility, city property, no smoking. And then you don't have to make this list of trails and this and that and so forth. It's just, if it's a city-run facility, we don't allow smoking. Boom, we're done.
That would be equally enforceable, but we were just trying to be explain to the public who might read the code that this is what we mean.
Vote, so. Mr. Mayor.
We have one more councilman wants to talk. Mr. Olbert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, further clarifying question for Mr. Rubens. How would this ordinance relate to the proposed Wheeler Plaza complex? I mean, I guess we're selling the property to the developer at some point, and so it will no longer be city property. But like, what about the little park area that we have there and the parking lot and whatnot?
After that development is complete, the parking area will be conveyed to the city, so that'll become again part of the public facilities. And the plaza, the open area plaza where the former Foodville building and driveway is, would also be considered a public facility.
So I take it from your earlier comments, just want to confirm this, we're not trying to ban smoking in the city parking lots. That's kind of like the sidewalk situation you were describing, or maybe we are.
That we did not list parking areas in this, and there might be an issue of those are similar to sidewalks, and that's a very good question. I was not intending to regulate the parking lots, but just the plazas and the access points to plazas. So that's why those words were there.
Okay.
But since we're on introduction, if you intend to have the city's parking plazas included in that terminology, we certainly would want to add that.
And the little park/plaza that's planned as part of the Wheeler Plaza development, that would be essentially like Harrington Park.
Yeah,
So
yes, that'll be included.
That would be covered.
That would be covered.
Just as an aside, thinking through some of this stuff, it might be kind of confusing and difficult for people, even if they wish to follow the rules, to remember that, okay, I'm on the sidewalk and I can smoke, but I just stepped into the plaza and now I can't. And not that there's going to be somebody waiting to hit them with a ticket, but you see what I'm getting at? We're drawing a distinction that's a little bit artificial.
Well, there will be signage at these plazas and public spaces that will notify the public that smoking is prohibited in those areas.
Assuming people read them.
Well, people often don't, but...
Thank you.
Councilmember Olberton, speaking to your question about the parking areas in particular, I know at the staff level it was our intention to leave out the parking areas from the ordinance. So if that's something that the council wants to have included, you might make that amendment if this is introduced.
All right, well, that brought up a question for me, and that is we're going to have 2 enclosed parking structures. Will this, as written, as proposed, as amended, cover those enclosed parking structures?
No, I think that's to be clear, we didn't intend to regulate smoking in the parking areas. They're similar to the sidewalk areas, but if you want to regulate that, we would want you to specifically add that as an area, a public place
I don't know if an enclosed parking structure makes them any more any more dangerous from people smoking than an outdoor area. It just was, when Mark brought it up, it came to mind.
I would suggest that they're a lot less dangerous than the exhaust coming from the automobiles that are going in and out of the parking garage.
All right. I don't see any more questions. So we did ask for public comment, which didn't appear to be none. Ready for a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
I move to introduce ordinance number
1495,
an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos, amending San Carlos Municipal Code, Chapter 12.12.260, regulation of park facilities, smoking.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any other discussion? Mark?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I won't belabor this too much. I just want to make it clear that on a personal level, I actually feel very sorry for people who, as I said before, I view as tending to be addicted to smoking. It's a very unhealthy habit. I don't ever object to it being minimized in the public environment. But I'm actually going to vote against this ordinance for the simple reason that, based on the questions that I'm hearing here in the discussion, I just feel like this has been brought forward without adequate time to kind of study it and for us to feel it. I mean, it's I guess maybe another way of putting it is I think it's a laudable goal. I just see a lot of things that kind of raise disturbing questions in my mind. So I just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Crystal, would you like to call the roll?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
No.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. All right. Well, we are going to...
Mr. Mayor?
Yes. I think, yes, on-street dining. I'm sorry, I circled that item too soon. Consideration of adopting a resolution approving an on-street dining pilot program. Mr. Savay.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. The City Council has expressed an interest in considering an on-street dining program, and back in March adopted a strategic objective that requested a proposal for temporary restaurant parklets, or the use of public parking spaces for outdoor dining. And we have looked at pilot programs in this type of thing in other communities, and so I'm going to introduce Laurel Russell, our senior planner, to walk you through this, and will be available to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Again, I'm Laura Russell with the Planning Division. So since it is a City Council strategic plan goal and objective to bring forward the program, staff has researched a number of best practices for sidewalk cafes as well as for parklets to develop the proposed pilot program that we're presenting tonight for the City Council's consideration.
The pilot program application process that staff is proposing would be open to restaurants in the 600, 700, and 800 blocks of Laurel Street. We propose that the dining area in front of those restaurants be used the parking spaces in front of those restaurants be used for the dining opportunity. So staff proposes that a maximum of 2 restaurants be selected for an 18-month pilot period. The 18 months would start when the city permits have been finalized, so the restaurants would be able to operate for the 18 months. So the idea is to construct a curb extension out over the city street that would be flush with the sidewalk. So it would be constructed similar to parklets in San Francisco that you may be familiar with. The safety and design requirements would be based on best practices from other cities. So many people have seen the curb extensions over parallel parking spaces, but they are less common with angled parking spaces like we have on Laurel Street. So here's an example of an overhead view of on-street dining with angled parking. Staff estimates that it would take 3 parking spaces in front of a restaurant to create a dining area that would be safe and usable, and that could vary, of course, based on the individual site constraints, the tree wells, the bulb outs, and the location. So you can see in this diagram how the planters create the edge around the outside and the safety barrier. And it's set in a little bit from the adjacent parking spaces, both for safety and to allow full use of those spaces. So restaurants in the 600, 700, and 800 blocks would be invited to apply in kind of a call for projects or RFP type of a process. So we did take this idea to the Economic Development Advisory Committee, and based on some feedback that we received from them, staff would recommend a selection committee, including representatives from the Chamber of Commerce, EDAC, TNC, Planning Commission, and city staff to choose the 2 restaurants that would participate. Once the restaurants are selected, they would develop formal plans, which would be reviewed by the Planning Commission. Then they would apply for building permits and encroachment permits to construct the actual physical platform as well as the amenities. In terms of selection criteria, this is what staff has developed for your consideration. First, of course, is the willingness to participate in the program and pay the necessary permit costs. So staff estimates that the fees for approval and construction would be about $2,400 for the planning, building, and encroachment permits. They would also have to be in compliance with the current municipal code for outdoor dining. So if they already have outdoor dining, they would need to have the appropriate permits in place and not have any code enforcement issues associated with their business. The selection committee would also be looking for high quality design and quality exterior materials. And again, based on some feedback from EDAC, staff recommends that the 2 locations that would be allowed overall throughout the downtown area be limited so that they wouldn't be on the same side of the street on the same block to avoid any potential conflicts with over-concentration that may happen during the pilot program. No. In regards to design, let's see. Great. Staff recommends that the basic elements of the design, such as the railings, the platform, and the planters, be required to complement the existing downtown infrastructure. So that would be similar to the planters and the bench that are shown in the picture here. Restaurants could add their own colors and image through the tables, chairs, and accessories that they used. The current code requirements for outdoor dining would remain in place, and those address things like the quality of the materials. And the final design would be approved by the Planning Commission. If the City Council decides to move forward with the pilot program, staff would need to develop more detailed administrative program materials, and we provided a description of those to you in attachment number 4 to the staff report. In particular, those materials would address safety, things like liability, insurance requirements, and other technical issues. We would anticipate that the safety barrier would likely be a concrete planter that is similar to used in other communities, and there could be secondary safety elements such as wheel stops, soft hip posts, and reflective elements, again, that are used in other cities. The maintenance and operation of the dining areas would be the responsibility of the restaurant. The city would apply conditions of approval related to cleanup, landscaping maintenance, everyday operations, compliance with health department regulations, and compliance with ABC. At the end of the 18-month pilot program, City Council could decide to continue the program, to alter it, potentially to place it within the municipal code, or potentially to end the pilot program. So staff would bring back at that time our observations and the things that we've learned from the program, and then would look to you to decide whether it should continue as a policy question. So the action before the City Council tonight, if you would wish to move forward with the pilot program, staff would recommend that you adopt the resolution approving the program as described in the staff report and with the attachments, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Laura. Bob?
You mentioned 3 parking spaces. Is that minimum or maximum?
We think that it will take 3 in most cases. There are a few cases where it might be possible to do it with 2 parking spaces if it's adjacent to a city bulb out, or like where the lamp posts
So as
project.
I said, is it so it's maximum of 3?
Maximum.
Thank you. That's good. That's all.
Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question for staff before I get to that. I'd like to ask that at the end of this item, before we adjourn to closed session, I did have one potential future agenda item sparked on our recent discussion about smoking that I'd like to bring up. Question I have here is, are there specific components of the plan during the pilot program which would either, I guess not replace the parking spaces that are going to be lost, but somehow try and compensate for that? And I know one of the things that occurred to me was that a restaurant might commit to saying, well, we will make sure that our employees use 3 less spaces wherever they're parking on local streets or in parking lots or whatnot. Primarily because what I'm concerned about since we first talked about this is the growing concern about parking being in very short supply. Particularly at certain times of day in the downtown core. So are anything like that part of the plan, or has staff thought about that? Are there alternatives that we could include? What have you?
We have been thinking about that, and I'll elaborate on that.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, yes, there would be a net loss of parking. One of the things that, as you mentioned, I guess to kind of take from there, one thing we could do is check with the restaurant and say, look, if you're taking 2 or 3 parking spaces, then you ought to pay for your employees' permit parking, or provide something like a free transit pass to the number of employees that, based on the number of parking spaces you're taking away. So those are some alternatives we've talked about. We haven't put them in as criteria for the program, but we certainly could.
Could we, just a brief follow-up question, do you think we could make those a requirement for the program?
Yes.
And you think that we'd still have interest on the part of restaurateurs?
Yes, absolutely.
Personally, I'd love to see that made as a requirement. Thank you.
Matt.
The question I have is, I'm trying to see this, long-term factor, because I'm questioning why do a pilot program if it's going to have if there's going to be problems long-term. And the long-term factor is you're saying right now, I think, with the pilot program that you would be open to a few applications, and once those are taken, they're taken. Is that correct?
Yes, we would propose at this time that there be 2 locations to give staff an opportunity to evaluate those.
And then if it was to go forward, you couldn't have restaurant after restaurant after restaurant doing this because you wouldn't have any parking. So how are you going to pick and choose who gets and who doesn't get?
So we have done some research on what some other cities do. So some of them limit it in the total number in relationship to their available parking spaces. Some do it like a radius, like a concentration, that you can't be within a certain distance of another one. And so depending on the outcome of the pilot program, staff would present some options in terms of appropriate ways to move forward if the City Council wanted to do that.
All right. The question I have is when you talk about this pilot program, and you've got, and maybe I missed it, are you looking at a maximum number of spaces to, I know it's 3 per business, but in terms of the total participants?
2.
Just 2 to start with?
2 participants.
2 to start with.
Okay. Has there been a lot of interest? I mean, well more than 2 restaurants, I assume, are interested in this, right?
We do think that a number of people are interested. We wanted to provide criteria that would help us to select them if we get a large number, but we also recognize that there's a pretty significant capital investment for those restaurants in order to pay for the installation of this dining area and the safety aspects of it. So we are hopeful that 2 will generate enough interest and give us enough information to evaluate it.
So for the pilot program, we're looking at a grand total of a loss of about 6 parking spaces?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, Cameron, you had a question.
Just 2 brief questions. So you mentioned the capital expenditure. Could you remind us what you think, sort of the all-in investment cost for a restaurant would be to create one of these on-street dining platforms?
We have a couple of different sources. The estimates that we've received are between $25,000 and $40,000 to build the platform, including all of the safety elements and the semi-permanent features of the platform.
Mm-hmm. And if we did the pilot program and decided that we didn't want to proceed with it, is there a way for them to get reimbursed, or do they lose their investment?
The way that the program is proposed now, they would lose that investment. So there's not a reimbursement opportunity included.
Okay. And then I just wanted to take, for you and for Al, potentially just sort of the macro view here. My view of this, and I'm a supporter of this idea, is that to some degree, we're in competition with downtowns all up and down the peninsula about where people choose to have lunch, choose to bring their kids for an ice cream cone, choose to go out for dinner. And that this type of on-street dining adds to kind of the ambiance of downtown, and it provides kind of an increased sort of competitive advantage against other downtowns in the region. I wondered if you agree with that, and if you might elaborate a little bit.
I think that there are significant benefits associated with it in terms of creating the vitality and enhancing the outdoor dining experience, and certainly other cities are doing the same thing to try to emulate that. Mountain View is one of the examples that we provided you, and they have a very long-standing program that's very successful. The other example is Menlo Park, that is kind of striving for the type of downtown environment that we already have, and they are actually subsidizing a similar program to this in order to create that street vitality. But I'll also hand it over to Al on that.
I would agree with those comments. And as you know, outdoor dining on Laurel is a very popular endeavor. Everybody goes there to dine, and it's great weather. They see their friends, family members. And so there are increasing pressures also to expand that experience in our downtown, and some of the more popular restaurants would like the opportunity to try it out. And and as Laura said, it's a good alternative to other alternatives in downtown. So I would agree that it's something that it couldn't hurt to try. Of course, we're losing a few parking spaces, but and I think that the restaurants that would get into the business of it understand the risks of it and would make the money back on their investment as well.
Now, while I have you, can I ask you one last question, which is, we kicked around the idea, should this be a pilot program or should it just be something that we would suggest would be fully implemented? And I know you kind of went back and forth. Why did you finally decide to do it as a pilot program?
I think that because while we know that it is successful in other communities, we do have some parking issues in our downtown that we're still working on. And until we maybe get some of that pressure, it's probably a good idea to see if this creates a problem that we didn't anticipate. And also, I think for a chance to get the community to get used to this idea and maybe enjoy it and get their opinion on how it works before we go ahead and let it happen all over town.
Okay, great, thanks.
Bob?
The cost that Laura mentioned, 25 to 40, is that numbers that you spoke with Mountain View and Menlo Park about? That just seems like I've sat in some of those things in Menlo Park. You can go to Home Depot and let's throw some wood down and boom, boom, you're done. I mean, I'm shocked, to be quite blunt. Are those numbers that they quoted you that they had? $25,000, especially in Mountain View, also $25,000.
Yeah, I mean, those, if you look at the equipment and the weight of it, and also that would include things like, the chairs and tables and umbrellas and things like that. So you're all in at $25,000 to $40,000, and you don't want it to look bad either. I mean, that's another thing.
I understand.
You want it to be well designed so it doesn't fall apart, so that it's safe and things like that.
I think it's a great idea, but I'll tell you what, if I was a restaurateur, I'd have to really look hard at that number, especially since as Mr. Johnson said, you're not getting anything back on it. Wow. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone that would like to speak on this issue? I have two people raising their hands.
I'm just kind of aghast.
Come on up. You can fill out a card later.
I haven't prepared anything.
That's okay. Lots of people don't prepare stuff.
And every Friday, my husband and I have date night downtown San Carlos. And number one, the weather is not that conducive to staying outside unless you have overheating overhead. So if you're out in the street at night, that means heat lamps and everything else. And I'm wondering about how conducive that is to have heat lamps. And then secondly, the parking issue. We go on Friday night and we're circling and circling and circling looking for a place to park. So I think we need to solve that first. I mean, that really kind of concerns me. Even losing 3 or 4 or 5 different parking places is an issue, I think. We're looking forward to having this parking facility built, and I don't know when that's going to happen, 2017 or 18, something like that. I'm not sure. Is it 2017?
I begin construction next May.
Okay. So I wanted to know, what is the true advantage of having this kind of situation when you don't have real conducive weather? I don't understand it, other than maybe the restaurateurs have more space to have more people come and dine. But I don't think it's going to be comfortable sitting out in the evening unless you have heaters and stuff. Is this a reason? The reason you're having this is because restaurant people have come to you and said they want to have this outdoor dining? Or is it because we're competing with Menlo Park, who has maybe a whole different environment that's not conducive for San Carlos? So these are just questions.
Okay.
And are there any answers to those questions?
We can ask the staff. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council. Heat lamps are used for instance, in downtown Mountain View. It's okay to use the propane-style heat lamps. It's okay from a building code perspective to, make sure the platform's okay, but it works in other communities as well. And really, the original idea came from the restaurant community. Staff was meeting with businesses and restaurateurs in a separate meeting, and so this issue sort of began in dialogue with the business and restaurant community here. It didn't begin at a staff level necessarily at all. So that's kind of how it came up.
Okay, thank you. Bonnie, you want to come on up?
I
I'm overwhelmed that they would attempt this now. I had some questions. I thought that the sidewalks were going to be wider on San Carlos Avenue after the Wheeler Plaza project was completed. Wasn't that for outdoor dining, or is that not so?
Bonnie, if you could address that.
Okay. I'm wondering about the width of the sidewalks proposed for San Carlos Avenue, which is wider on that side than Laurel. I question, as someone that likes to go and eat outside, it's very nice, but it isn't nice if I'm sitting out where there's car exhaust going right by me. It's bad enough when people are walking with dogs along the Laurel when I'm sitting out at a table. I personally like to sit on the inside, right on the inside of the window so I can look out, but I don't have to put up with San Carlos weather, which is like 10 or 15 degrees colder than Menlo Park and Mountain View. And we're even colder than Burlingame because of the wind that we have in San Carlos. Designing these, it might be that you would look at Middlefield, that block where Century 12 is, and there are outdoor areas there. They have a lot wider street. Middlefield is wider. If you're going to do something like this, why don't we just close Laurel Street for a block and allow those restaurants to have outdoor dining and figure out the parking for that many parking places and really have a nice plaza. But remember, again, with Wheeler, you're going to have a plaza on Laurel Street. So it just seems like bad timing to me. That's it.
Okay. Thanks, Bonnie. All right. Would anyone else like to speak on this?
I would.
Bob, do you want to make a comment before we continue?
Yeah, I just want to make sure everybody understands. Nobody's forcing anybody to do anything. They're going to go to a restaurant person. If he wants to spend $25,000 and have somebody do this and nobody sit there, it's his problem. I'm confused on nobody's forced. It's an idea. So if they want to do it, fine. If they don't, no problem. So nobody's going to force anybody to sit next to cars. Nobody's going to force anybody to sit outside. It's just a plan. It's just a plan.
The thought that occurs to me, though, is you do the pilot, and could well turn out successful. Then you have the issue, I don't know, at last count, there's 40 or 50 restaurants on Laurel Street, and who gets to play? And that, I think, will be an exciting conversation that you all might end up with. And I think before you kind of put this in motion, you ought to think about that end of the puzzle, because it could get very messy.
Okay, thank you, John. All right. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Mr. Black.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a very creative idea from our planning department, and I compliment them on that. But one of the problems that I see is that we lose, for each of these setups, we lose 3 parking places, and then to compound the problem, we increase the demand for parking by having 3 extra tables. So I think that we've got to think really tightly about that, because we already have kind of not enough parking on Laurel Street. So we'd lose more than 3 parking places for each of the installations. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, anyone else like to speak? Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Mark has a question, I think, before we move on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question for Mr. Rubens, sparked by some of the conversation. I'm unclear, Greg, about whether there's a dimension of this where I'm going to use the term gift of public funds, but it's obviously not public funds. But essentially what we're doing is we're taking public property and we are, at least for some limited period of time, giving it to the sole use of the particular private property owner. So are there concerns that we need to address there? Do we have the ability to just do that whenever we choose to? What do we need to be thinking about?
Well, on this particular proposal, it's a pilot proposal under a resolution over property that the city has control over. You have total right to regulate the parking scheme downtown. So I think that's what we're doing here. Because it's a permit process, there's no permanent property right that's attached to it. So permits can be revoked and conditions can be placed on them. But certainly it adds to from a planning perspective, it's going to add to some vibrancy and might add to the bottom line of a restaurant that gets one of these permits. But strictly speaking, I don't believe this is a gift of public funds situation. But those are legitimate issues as when you're determining what types of conditions you'd like to impose on these permits. And you raised one of them already about parking issues, but those are things that we can develop that would be part of the program.
The reason I asked is because while this is talking about using parking spaces, it occurred to me, hypothetically, could we come back and say, I'm not saying the council would want to do this, could we come back and say, hey, if you'd like to open a branch of your restaurant in Burton Park, go ahead, okay? I'm sure that actually would be, during the summer, very popular and probably make a lot of money for a restaurateur. And what I'm hearing you say is that because it is public property essentially managed within the confines of the law by the city, we do have a fair amount of flexibility of deciding how we wish to see that public property used, even if it's to dedicate it to a private enterprise.
You do, but I think there are limits to it, and this pilot program, I think, in essence, is really saying you believe there is a public purpose. I think the staff report talked about dynamism in downtown, but I think the park is a little different than the parking area. I think the parking area, you're basically giving up 3 parking spaces here, and it's not the same as having a concession in Burton Park or just allowing a restaurant to set up shop in the park. So I think there's a distinction there, but. That's the issue that gift of public funds and public purpose. I said that earlier on an earlier agenda item. It's basically a pretty solid principle in the law, and so I don't think you're necessarily doing that here. You're not, because you're identifying a public purpose by, i.e., adding vibrancy to the downtown.
Jeff, I see your light on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to jump in here real quick to back up a little bit, because we do have some new folks in the audience, and they provided a lot of great feedback and dialogue tonight. This has been an item that's been discussed several times now at council meetings, and it's kind of evolved over the past 2 years. While certainly it did start with the restaurateur community, we've also heard from a number of members of the public in the past who would like this kind of thing. The real trade-off is those parking spaces. A real concern that we're wrestling with are that criteria about moving forward. How many restaurants are even going to want to do this, which is sort of why we have a RFP style process that they can apply for. That'll give us some indication about what interest there might be in the future, because obviously we're going to have to limit the number of these if they go in the downtown, and figure all that out. There are a lot of questions that are raised by this particular program, which is why in the past the staff has felt fairly strong that it be put in place, if it's put in place as a pilot program, and that restaurateurs understand that going in, the 2 that would be selected if it ever gets that far, that there are no guarantees beyond 18 months. And, really, I think the 18-month period was not only, constructed to give staff enough time to evaluate it, but also the restaurants enough time to recoup their investment, because they would be making a good faith effort. So I just wanted to provide a little more context for some of the folks that were here this evening speaking about it. And again, we greatly appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to move to adopt Resolution 2015-86, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos approving an on-street dining pilot program. However, Greg, help me if I do this wrong, with the caveat that there be specific elements of the program such to attempt to offset the loss of the parking spaces.
That's adequate for the purpose of your motion, because we have to develop all those portions of the program.
Okay.
I second.
And there's a second. All right. Any more discussion on this, Matt?
I see real problems with this. I think Mr. Black pointed out that it's not just the loss of 3 parking spaces. I'm counting 6 tables. It's the loss of 9 parking spaces, if you put that together. I agree with the folks who talked about the weather and everything. I understand what Bob's saying, that you don't have to choose to be out there, and I understand that. But I'm just looking at it as a function into the future. Can something like this work in San Carlos? And if it can't, why get started with it and create parking problems? Because if you do this at 2 restaurants, that's 18 spaces altogether. No, it's not, because you're going to lose 3 spaces at each one. That's 6. But count the tables. You've also added a demand to what wasn't there before. You've got 6 additional tables. That's 6 additional parking spaces you need. So your net loss is 9 in each situation. So that's 18 potentially. Well, it's a potential parking congestion problem, and we already have a parking problem. I also see an issue that's not been resolved even currently, where you have when you walk in front of some of the restaurants right now on a busy Friday evening or Saturday evening, there's trouble with wait staff using the sidewalk, as they have to do, and people trying to walk by. This is going to compound that problem. And lastly, I don't see it being resolved in the future of the unfairness of some win, some lose. From my approach to government and law is always that if you're going to create something, it has to be on an equitable basis. We pledge allegiance to the flag, right? Liberty for all, equalness for all. This is not equalness. This is offering to some restaurants an advantage over others because they got in and they chose to participate in the program, and then the guy that comes along later and says, hey, that works pretty well, I want in, and goes to the city, and the city says, sorry, you're within 50-foot radius, you can't do it. So that's not how law is supposed to be applied. Law should be applied where only it can be equal to everybody, and I see this as being unequal, and I don't see any resolution of that if it is successful and would go forward in the future. On the other hand, I do like the dynamics, but I think really where we are with something like this is if we were to do another, sometime in the future, remodel of our downtown, this is something that we have to think about, is how do we redesign the downtown and the sidewalks and the use of Laurel Street and San Carlos Avenue, et cetera, in such a way that it allows for a lot of outdoor dining, because it is something that people want. But I just don't think this is the right way to go.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. One is, I thought, Matt, you made a number of good points there. I do want to point out that even in other public sector environments, fairness sometimes is fairness of access, not necessarily fairness of outcome. The thought that occurred to me years ago, I used to work in the oil and gas industry, and the way the federal government leases their properties is they basically put it out to bid, and not everybody gets a lease. it's the people who are willing to pay the most that get the lease. I'm not saying that we should necessarily use that model here, but I suspect that something like that could exist, and that's deemed to be fair because it's open to everybody. The other comment I wanted to make is I hope that staff will continue to have discussions with restaurateurs and other business owners downtown, that to the extent that this succeeds and looks like an attractive thing, to all those issues related to parking, we need to jointly solve the parking problem. Okay, we all know it's a problem. We even earlier in this meeting talked about the importance of following up on some of the issues on the south end of Laurel Street, which is nowhere near as dynamic as the north end of Laurel Street yet. And so I hope this is used as a forum or nexus or focus or whatever you want to call it to get business owners to understand that if these kinds of things are successful, we can have that kind of success, but they're going to have to work with us to kick in to improve the parking resources in town. Otherwise, we're going to be forced to not do stuff like this. So that was the comment I wanted to make. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Cameron.
Thank you. I agree with what's been said about the shortage of parking. You know, the best solution for a parking problem is like no business. And I think, you know, we're a victim of our own success. Even if we didn't do this and didn't allow on-street dining, the parking problem is going to get worse because San Carlos is booming. And, you know, there's new restaurants moving in every day. There's more people who want to spend time here, and that's great. It's great for the city. It's great for the atmosphere. It just makes it a wonderful place to live. And I just want to say, so to me, the question about 3 spaces or 6 spaces is sort of beside the point. Like, we've got a major challenge, and we're working on fixing it. I would also say that, you know, if you go back 15 years ago or so, there wasn't nearly as much vibrancy downtown, and there were much stronger parking requirements for businesses on Laurel Street. And it was the foresight of some previous councils to relax some of those parking requirements. And I'm sure there was opposition at the time, and it led to a lot of investment in the downtown from private businesses, and I think it was a great thing to do, and I think we should be encouraging experimentation to try and find out what's the best thing for our town. The last thing that I was going to say is, well, there's a couple things I wanted to say. First of all, I don't want people to think that we're doing this independent of any other strategy around parking. You know, we have a major parking garage going in at Wheeler Plaza, which is something that's been worked on for over a decade. We have staff working on developing parking garage in another part of the city. We're actively looking at property. Whether or not that's going to happen is unclear, but we are working on this. And then finally, Matt, what I would say is that, you know, if you're going to make a $25,000 to $40,000 investment to build a platform outside your restaurant, you basically have to be selling out your restaurant. And so I think I've had a number of conversations with restaurant owners. I think I understand theoretically that, you know, you could imagine that, you know, there could be a huge demand, but from a practical perspective, I think it's going to be 1 or 2 restaurants that are really going to be able to do this for the foreseeable future. So I think it's an opportunity to add to vibrancy of the downtown and not. I don't see it getting out of control.
Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to share a slightly different perspective on one element of what Cameron just said. I do think that earlier city councils were creative and forward-looking in terms of relaxing some of the parking restrictions that were in place back then for commercial businesses on Laurel Street. But they had a little bit of a different situation. They basically had an unutilized asset. I mean, the joke was that what those same council members used to say is you could roll a bowling ball down Laurel Street and probably not hit a car anywhere. So when you're in that situation, relaxing the rules is one thing. When you're in a situation where you've got a serious parking problem that's getting worse, that's a different situation. So they're not really, strictly speaking, comparable, at least to me.
I hear you. And I did want to make one other point, and then I'll stop. to your earlier point about getting the businesses to participate in sharing the cost of new parking, I'd point to the efforts that we're making on trying to put together a downtown business association and actually have the business owners assess themselves for the purpose of investing in downtown. And I think parking is a totally reasonable way to direct some of those funds if and when that happens.
Okay, well, I would just add that, and that's a good comment, Cameron, that when you create this momentum of businesses who are going to engage in these kinds of programs, it sort of encourages other business to be interested in it, and it also gives us some leverage to have a downtown association say, see, you can increase your business, and if we put together a good program, then we really want you to participate in and contribute to creating more parking. So it's one of the things I like about it. One thing Cameron mentioned that was that we have the new parking structure coming in with Wheeler Plaza. I just want to remind everybody that is going to have about 60 more additional parking spaces over what exist currently, so that will help. But the thing I think that I like most about this, and I'm not wildly enthusiastic about it, but what I do like about it is that it is temporary. It is a pilot program. I like pilot programs. And we have a pretty good reputation in this town of trying things. We also have a good reputation of when things don't work, when we try them, we stop them. So I don't think we'd be afraid to terminate a program that we didn't think was working. So it's for those reasons I think that we should probably move forward with this at this time. So, well, let's find out. Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Collins?
Yes. Okay, and with that, we are now going to go into a closed session. We will come.
Mr. Mayor?
I have it written right here. Mark, future agenda item. Apologize.
Thank you. Just because I appreciate your flexibility here, because I'm not sure I would necessarily remember this by the time of our next meeting. It seems to me that given the action the council took tonight on regulating outdoor smoking in public spaces, and I emphasize the outdoor part of this, I think we need to take up the discussion, and probably involves various commissions and staff doing work. I think we need to take up the issue of smoking in multifamily residential housing. I've been hesitant to bring that forward before, but in all honesty, if we're going to basically say that we're regulating smoking outside in the open environment for health and safety reasons, and that's the primary reason, as Cameron pointed out in the dialogue with staff, that we're doing this, then it's hard to imagine why we wouldn't at least want to consider it where people live. And so that's my idea for a future agenda topic that we discuss. We bring that forward. I don't know if anybody else is interested in that, but it seems to me we've sort of set the stage that we need to do that.
Anybody else on the council interested in bringing that up? I'm not hearing any support. So, sorry. All right. Now, I believe we're going to go back into closed session. We will come back out here if anybody wants to wait around, but thank you for coming.